What is up, everybody? Happy Monday and welcome to the Tip-Off. This is the show that sets the stage for all the most important news, daily fantasy plays, and bets on tonight's 2-game NBA slate and 3-game MLB slate. I am your host, Kayla Knierim. Joining me today, we've got Lindquist, Chris Spags in the house. Fellas, how we doing? How was our weekends? Tell us everything.
I'm feeling glad to be back here. It has been a day of doing a lot of this ugly MLB slate, but it's a 3-gamer on Fanduel, 2-gamer on Draftkings. That'll hopefully be fun for some people out there and got enough of I honestly feels like a Truman Show kind of thing where they're like, hey, do this 3-game MLB slate, do it multiple times. And then also we're going to make it worse throughout the course of the day. But I'm feeling good, excited to be here. I feel like Monday's the tip-off. It's gloomy here in Southern California. I can always count on you two to brighten my day.
Good morning.
Yeah,
and if
I have a sweater on.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Sorry.
Sweater weather. Oh, look at you. You know movies. Look at that. That's fantastic. I'm doing great here too. Everything's nice. Everything's dandy. Coming off of a nice NBA weekend. It's nice to get back in action here again today. But yeah, Spags, doing the Lord's work over there, doing these 2- and 3-gamer MLBs for 2 hours. I mean, at a certain point, I was just kind of like waiting for you to, it was like a filibuster. It was fantastic.
It's professionalism, I'm sure, is what they call that. But no, just enthusiasm for MLB DFS. Even when the games are ugly, even when the slates are ugly, there's always money on the line. So you got to find your joy somewhere.
Love it.
All right. Love it. Love it. Okay. And as always, friends, don't forget to hit that like button right now. Do it. Subscribe to the channel for countless hours of content on the NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, MMA, NASCAR, and every other sport that's in season. Also, I want to let you know, to get access to all the great Awesemo Plus tools and content for nearly every DFS sport out there, get an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. This includes full access to all the premium content and tools on Awesemo.com, including player projections, ownership projections, our premium Slack channel, lineup builder, and much more. Only looking to play MLB DFS? Then sign up now for our Awesemo Plus MLB weekly package for only $15.95. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Heading into our bad beats. It was quite the weekend in the association. The Nets were sublime versus the Bucks. The 76ers were subpar against the Hawks, and the Mavericks were subdued by the Clippers in yesterday's Game 7. Were you both on the right side of it in DFS and sports betting, or were you left out in the cold like Luka? Ouch. Eric, we'll start with you.
That piqued my interest. That was lovely. It's always nice to get a little flub early in the show. Get it out of the way early. We're ready to rock. Alzale. We'll get there later too. Subdued. And they had like the sub. It was alliteration. Not even alliteration. It was like the word within the word. Okay, I'm going to move on. But I felt fantastic. Game 7 is all that mattered to me. The Clippers winning. That is what I needed in my life. Thank you, Jesus, because I did not hedge out at any point. I should have. Maybe in hindsight. No, in hindsight, it worked out fantastic. But, it was nice to see the 6 straight road games streak come to a halt in that series. Hopefully the Clippers can play a little better in the next series. They have their work cut out for them.
Yeah, I would say for me, yesterday was fine, I guess. I didn't make any bad lineups, didn't end up winning a ton of money either, so I can't say anything that positively. Saturday, though, I do feel like there were some bad beats. In particular, a thing we talked about where I did the deeper dive that day with Eric's good friend, Rin Pack, who did a great job, the slate starter all year long, those two, and actually a duo to watch here for the upcoming NBA season when that show is back. But Ryan, such a sharp player and such a good guy, and he, one of the debates we had on the show is him liking James Harden a little bit more than Kevin Durant. That one went poorly for Ryan, so I'll absorb his bad beat into mine. But the one that was really bad was Deandre Jordan, a player who we talked about, and he did start every game against the Bucks throughout the year. So I think there was a chance that he could just magically get his way back into the rotation because of something that Steve Nash is seeing and wanted to get him in there. And then in our projections actually backed that out too, where we had Deandre Jordan getting, I believe, 8 minutes, which for a showdown slate can be crucial. That's the difference between a guy who's usable, who opens up everything else on the slate, and a guy who is basically going to be a non-factor. And he did not get any of those 8 minutes. And that for a showdowns, I can tell you, if you are following my journey here of having one nice win, trying to parlay it into some more, showdown 150 maxes are not a good idea, I would say, for the most part. Even for me, I was way under the field on James Harden. I think just barely was a little bit under break even on that day despite that. And DeAndre Jordan was certainly a big part of it. So I hate him, and I hope he doesn't play today, because if he plays today and he's good, oh boy, there will be some sternly worded tweets in DeAndre Jordan's future, or probably more segments on here that'll just be mean to him for no reason.
How about that 150 max on, I believe it was Friday, Game 6, the Clippers, when like the most duplicated lineup binked? Like, how about that? That has to be your bad beat, right?
Yeah, I mean, that one was, well, so that's the thing is like, because I take out, the X amount of high owned lineups, I took that out of my lineup consideration. So I didn't even get to chop up the $200 that was split in the DK 100K tournament. So yeah, it was one where, I feel like in showdowns, you can make the right choices, and the right choices sometimes won't be right relative to profitability, because the goal is to win the tournament. And I think that's what it is. But yeah, that Friday slate was brutal. The Saturday one was less brutal because Mike James went off, and clearly nobody was going to play him. There was no logical reason to do it, but excited to talk about a lot him today, because that was certainly one curveball I think nobody would have had coming entering the series.
My bad beat is Subdued.
Subdued is
that is quite a bad beat.
I even read this beforehand. I don't know. I'm not going to make excuses, except I am. I went to bed at 2:30 in the morning and I'm having chest pains there.
Oh, that got real in a very real way, very quickly. I'm trying to think of levity. Should I start singing? What do I got to do? Do a silly voice? Somebody give me a silly voice.
We'll just add it to the Kayla-isms. We'll get a blooper reel going.
Yeah. You having a heart attack on the show? I feel like that would not be that would not be a fun blooper, I don't think. But maybe. Hilariously.
Look at her. She's collapsing. That's not funny.
Whoa,
guys, I'm saying that's not funny.
You'd have to ham it up like Sanford and Sons, where he would fake heart attacks and be like, Elizabeth, like she would have to do like a whole thing of it, I think, to make it funny. And even then, it would still be sad.
Yeah, it'd be a Coyote Roadrunner, and it's not fun.
And they would have to bring out the puppet just to do most to try to lighten the mood. It'd be terrible.
Oh, I'm deflecting.
This is getting so out of hand. I don't even know how to bring us back.
We're back. Professionals.
1, 2, 3. Eyes on me.
Ready.
Clearly, we never did that in school. All right.
Nope.
Let's head over to the NBA playoff second round now. The Bucks will look to rebound in game 2, as Giannis was the only bright spot for the Bucks on Saturday, with the line moving in Milwaukee's favor. Are you taking the points tonight? And aside from the Greek Freak, who stands out the most for you in DFS? Chris Spags.
I would say for me, I do think the Bucks, I mentioned before the series that I thought they would win it. I think having James Harden be out for one more game, and I think based on what we know of hamstring injuries, there's a lot of people with more expertise in that region have talked about it, on Twitter, on social media, on some of the broadcasts, but at least a weak injury for the most part when you re-injure a hamstring. And it does seem like, to me, I think there's value in taking the Bucks again. I know Brooklyn looked great in that first spot. Kyrie was really good, but you also had some outlier bad shooting days for guys like Drew Holiday, was shooting around 33%. I don't think that happens again. I think too, there's just room for these guys to have really outlier days where Drew was still used from a fantasy perspective, Chris Middleton as well, Giannis as well. And Giannis, we know, can put up monster days against Brooklyn, especially with how they're playing it right now, where I think today Giannis comes out and it goes right after Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin kind of luck box that day last time out, was really hustling and to his credit, playing his heart out. But that's not enough against a guy like Giannis, I think, who's going to continue to get better, continue to get stronger, continue to play more angry. I just think he'll be more ready for what Blake Griffin's going to offer today defensively. That's a matchup that should not work out, and somehow it did. So I think a lot of things to me are blowing in the direction of Milwaukee. They're also a favorite here. So in the spot, to me, I expect them to win. I think if somehow the line were to move towards Brooklyn, I would take the money line bet for Milwaukee. This is a team that I think wins the series, and I've thought that since before it. And now with no Harden, I think it's a much easier pathway to get there.
Yeah, we saw this number. I mean, you rarely see this. It's been bet all the way. It opened 2-point favorites for Brooklyn. They are now a 1-point dog. It's been bet through every number here. It's insane. And I'm right there for it because I am all on the Milwaukee train for today. Not in DFS necessarily, because I think you can't ignore some of the minutes that exist for like, I will just talk about Brooklyn here in a second, but Milwaukee up and down. I think that they're going to make some better adjustments coming out of just kind of a dud. They threw up a dud. You can't lose James Harden 1 minute into a game and not find some way to make that competitive. That was a very, very poor showing on their part. Giannis was the only piece that really went, but Middleton and Drew have been really good. They were really good in that first round. They've been good kind of on the entire tail end of this season. I feel like if they can start regressing back towards that mean, putting up production across the board, just both shot very poorly as well. I feel very confident that 3 stars or two decent stars with a superstar in Giannis is better than 1.5 or 2 if you want to give Kyrie the labeling of a top 10 player. But I just trust Middleton and Drew to play much, much better in this spot. Therefore, DFS, fire them up. Have some exposure there. 7,800 for Drew over on DraftKings. I really, really like. But most of all, bet Milwaukee.
Noted. As you both already alluded to, Brooklyn will be without James Harden for essentially a second straight game, opening up an enormous amount of value if the game 1 box score is to be trusted. How are you feeling about the crazy chalk values that are Blake Griffin and Mike James? And which stud are you prioritizing tonight? Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving, Eric?
So props to Fanduel, because Fanduel did an amazing job of reacting to these box scores. And I nag on them all the time for different stuff where it's like, what are you doing? But they have been very reactionary in these playoffs in terms of their pricing. They actually made it so that it's very, very playable. You don't have any kind of crazy ownership on a 5,100 Blake Griffin. He's right at 33%, which is kind of nothingness. Mike James is at 23% over there. Both are playable. Obviously, this is the game you want to be targeting. The total's been bet up 3 points. It's sitting around 237.5 across the industry now. I mean, the game environment is just outrageous, especially compared to the next game we're going to get to, which, yeah, I think there's some sneaky plays out of there, but there's nothing sneaky about going to Brooklyn and Milwaukee today. But Brooklyn up and down the lineup. I mean, you have both guys up top, Kyrie and Kevin Durant, getting north of 40% ownership, but the big talking point is on DraftKings, where Blake Griffin is just underpriced. If we're going to see anything close to the 35 minutes that he ended up putting up in that first game, played very well in the pick and roll, bigger body, bigger defender, ended up being out there quite a bit. PJ Tucker ended up in that starting unit for Milwaukee. We'll see if I think they probably do the same thing again. I don't think that was the issue so much as just everybody shot the ball poorly, and it seemed like Brooklyn just kind of had everything go right. And the main thing that they had go right is that they just inserted Mike James out of the middle of nowhere, and he was a spark plug. Ended up filling in very nicely for James Harden. You're not going to get James Harden production out of him, but when you have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on a floor, you don't really need that. You got 30 minutes, 16% usage. He's actually around a 24.3% usage guy, given most of his minutes aren't with Kyrie and Kevin Durant on the floor alongside of him. He's able to come in relief duty, but that's a pretty large number of usage. He didn't even shoot the ball that much, 5 of 11 comparatively for a guy who's out there for 30 minutes playing point guard. I like Mike James again today. I don't know how you get off of these two guys as mega chalk. I'm still going to be over the field on both of them. That should probably surprise nobody, because I am the chalk doc.
Yeah, I would say I'm with that as a play as well. The value of Blake Griffin, the value of Mike James on a slate where, if you've watched any of the shows or you've played any of the slates, it's been so hard to find value you can really rely, where guys like Maxi Kleber have paid off, Taj Gibson has paid off. Like, you just need guys who are getting minutes and have some faith in them, and that should be the case here. The one thing that worries me a little bit with Brooklyn is, I do think there's a chance that Blake Griffin just gets destroyed today. Like, I think he put up really the best effort you could expect a guy like him to see, a guy who's clearly on the other side of his upside, and I think that's something for him where that might be the best game you see from him. If it is something that he can sustain, then certainly he's going to keep playing a lot of minutes. Would have played probably 37 minutes last game if that game didn't get out of hand and he lost the last 1 or 2 minutes through the blowout. But I think in the spot, like, I'm still going to trust Blake Griffin. I will also try to hedge a little bit, where if he's not playing well, you probably do see Nick Claxton get a few minutes. You still maybe have the outside chance of getting that DeAndre Jordan run. That's something today, because it's not a showdown slate. I don't think you need to play him at all, but definitely a pathway there for the minutes to go elsewhere. And I'd say the same thing for Mike James, where if Mike James is running hot, he's going to get the minutes, but Bruce Brown also lurks for him. So I think that's sort of the spot that I'm viewing it, that you're getting, to me, you're going to want a good amount of both Mike James and Blake Griffin, but I think they have really logical leverage points for them, where Mike James could play less minutes because Bruce Brown's more effective, rebounding, more assisting, more doing a little bit of everything. And then Blake Griffin could play less minutes because he's just not getting the job done against Giannis. So maybe you see more Nick Claxton there, who did play better in the second half. But I think just treating these guys like, hey, they are very good plays, but also there's still probably a 50% chance of failure, maybe 40% for Blake Griffin. I feel like that's the way to do it, where you're taking these guys, or you're taking the direct leverage against them. And I think that's the way you probably have to approach it today.
Yeah, the one thing, just to interject for 1 second, the problem is that the direct leverage don't produce worth anything from a fantasy perspective. I mean, your direct leverage also is going to probably be thinned out across a couple of different players, rather than it all being allocated going to another player. Like Alize Johnson might play a couple minutes, like 4-6 minutes. Landry Shamet, we saw play 22, can probably get there too. But Landry Shamet, 0.65 Fanduel points on the season this entire year, as opposed to Blake Griffin, who's right around 1. So I find it difficult to really want to find like direct leverage. Is there somebody other than Claxton that you would have in mind to maybe play instead of Blake Griffin?
Well, not so much for Blake. I agree that without Jeff Green, there isn't really the direct leverage for him. But I think Mike James with Bruce Brown, to me, is the direct leverage, where Bruce Brown got taken out for the last few minutes, and then Joe Harris came in. But like Joe Harris's role, I think, is still functionally the one that's going to be there for the most part. And I guess maybe he has more risk to him too, where if they want to keep Mike James out there, if he's playing like he did last game and contributing on both ends, maybe they do. But I still think, like, if you took Mike James out of the closing lineup, like, who else would they go to? I think it's Bruce Brown. And if Blake Griffin's on the closing lineup, who else do they go to? I would think it's Nick Claxton, but I agree, like that's not as strong of a direct one, but I think there's a pathway for Claxton to heat up, to be really good in the pick and roll, and to be the thing that leads to Blake Griffin somehow getting a few less minutes, or he just benefits from Blake getting knocked down a little. So I'm with you. I think it's not a direct pivot, but I think just sort of treating it like, hey, there's something here that's going to go weird, I think is the way to sort of handle it for some portion of lineups.
Love that.
All right. Denver goes from a...
That's all.
Denver goes from
I love my dude. Oh, I'm going to interject one more time because this is what I do now. Okay, continue.
Do it.
Now we're set. I don't like dead air. Here we are.
How's that for dead air? All right.
That was mean.
Denver goes
that was like you in Florida. That was, yeah, cool. Good times.
Rude. That was not my fault.
What?
That was spotty Wi-Fi.
Oh, you're spotty Wi-Fi. You hate us. It's fine.
Technical issues right and left over here. Denver goes from a phenomenal offensive matchup to, well, the opposite in this series with the Suns. Aside from Nikola Jokic, are there any other players you're remotely considering to roster tonight, Chris Spags?
Yeah, I think Jokic is certainly the one that has the highest upside, definitely going to look good. He talked in some interviews about how Deandre Ayton's been the guy he finds the toughest to play against in the league, but he's gotten good results against him all year too. Not that the DVP stuff is going to matter too much, but worth noting, there's nothing really that you're going to like Steven Adams sometimes shuts guys down. It's not the case here for Jokic, even though you might have heard that quote and hold that to heart. Just keep that in mind, that it's just maybe him giving some platitudes to soften the guy up to attack him in this series. But Michael Porter Jr. is the one that really jumps out to me again. I feel like the price tag's still too low. He's going to find some tough wing defense, but I do think he really turned a corner in that Portland series in a way that I think is going to be sustainable, where he should have been doing that all series long. But I think there was a green light given in some way for him there to take a little bit more of the bull by the horns and also rebound a little more aggressively. And I think those are two things that can continue to pay off even with the low pace. And I'm willing to continue to go to Monty Morris and Austin Rivers. I think they project decently well. Aaron Gordon's kind of a blind spot for me, where I don't know what to expect. He was producing better from a fantasy perspective, but was also playing a lot more minutes. And I still think there are some ways to maybe not trust the minutes or the production quite as much based on the longer term sample size. So it's clearly Jokic and Porter Jr. as the priorities, but Monty Moore is still a mid-tier guy who can open up some things and work in different constructions. And Austin Rivers, a guy who's also going to potentially see some minutes where I think he can be a valuable play, or a value play who can be valuable. So those are the main guys to me, but I think it's clearly a spot. I get why people would be down on it. I think Denver holds their weight in this series.
Yeah, I think it's Jokic, Porter, and Austin Rivers on DraftKings, where he's 4K. I think that gives you some spots, but oh man, Aaron Gordon, I do not want to play. I do not want to play Monty Morris. Did you see Monty Morris's price tag on Fanduel? Are you playing on Fanduel today?
No, just DK.
6,700 is how much Monty Morris is over on Fanduel. That is lofty. Let me just say, that is a lofty number that almost made me like spit out my coffee, but I guess it matters. Like it makes sense that he would be expensive coming off of a couple of just ridiculous 40+ point games against Portland. This is not Portland. The Phoenix Suns, they are the number one team in defensive efficiency over the course of the last 2 months. So I'm feeling really good about going to the top guys, and that's about it. Like I don't feel good about taking shots on anybody else. And I don't know, maybe one of them, if there's one that was going to sneak through the cracks, like, I mean, maybe just because of the price tags, a guy like J. Michael Green, who's been playing low 20s minutes, can spike an upside. Had 2 23+ games, but there's just so much value and so many guys in a better game environment in that first spot. There's not really a late swap advantageous angle that you could take in a lot of these playoff series. Well, there has been a couple actually, but probably not going forward where it's only 2 gamers. Everybody's going to be waiting and trying to react on the same news. Joel Embiid's about as close as we'll get to being able to react to late news, but barring anything crazy, I just don't see getting to anybody besides Jokic and Porter for me.
The Suns made quick work of the Western Conference favorites in the first round and now get a vastly different defense to contend with. Eric, are there any Suns that stick out to you in prop bets or DFS this evening? And who do you think eventually takes the series?
Yeah, so I mean, I just talked about the defensive efficiency of the Suns. I mean, the number one team in regular season defensive efficiency was the Los Angeles Lakers. And now you're going from a Lakers matchup to the 11th defensive efficiency team in the Denver Nuggets. So that's a stark upgrade for them. They only averaged 104 points per game in that series and still won it outright 4-2. I mean, that just tells you what that series looked like last time out. I think that their offensive prowess, and they're going to project out a lot better for me on the front end of this series. They haven't really been priced for what this matchup should be. Now, given this is not Milwaukee and Brooklyn, if it were a different 2 games alongside of it, I think I would really want to be going massively overweight to a lot of these a lot of these pieces. But what you can do is you can head over to Odd Shopper, and there are a number of props that are sitting way too low, both on Chris Paul, on Mikal Bridges, and on DeAndre Ayton. And you should be betting all three, hoping to win 2 of 3. Their props are too low. They're all sitting about a point and a half underneath their regular season averages. Their minutes have all been up. The only difference is that they scored less points out. And I think that for whatever reason, I expected it to be baked into this, and maybe that it speaks to Denver's pace. But, they're bottom 5 in pace in the entire league, part of that being Jokic playing through him, but still giving up points. I love taking the over on all of them. Don't bet Booker's prop, but basically you could put Jay Crowder into that grouping too. Bet some over on some of those props because it is money to be had today.
Yeah, I like the Suns a lot today. I think they're the best priced team today on DraftKings with the most upside. And I talked some recently about Chris Paul being a guy who, in that last game against the Lakers, a little bit more from him would have given me a really nice day that would have hopefully continued to keep the hot streak going. But I'm still willing to go back there. Like, I think that's the thing with Chris Paul, that people like me who really trusted in him last time out, people who just don't think that he's healthy right now, those people already weren't going to play him. But I think there might be even less people who are into him at a cheap price tag on DraftKings of 6,500. That to me is a priority play today. I think too, the fact that Awesemo has this over as a decent chance of hitting over 13.5 points, 62% chance of winning. According to Awesemo, I think is a pretty good cosign on him as well. So Chris Paul, to me, probably the most appealing play. But Devin Booker for the pure tournament ceiling, the ownership to him is looking pretty low on DraftKings. On Fanduel, he'll be there a good amount because it's just easier to get there on Fanduel, the positionality and all of that as well. But I do think on DraftKings, 35% ownership for Booker. Wouldn't shock me if that's a little bit lower, if people do flock a little bit more to Kyrie and Kevin Durant to fill the void that James Harden leaves behind. So in this spot, to me, Booker, I think, has a GPP winning upside that you need to get above the field on. Chris Paul, I think, going to be owned because of the value, but wouldn't shock me if you get 50% of him and the field isn't quite as high as we're projecting right now because people being burned by Paul recently. So that's another good number to me. DeAndre Ayton, you need his size today in this spot. You really can't go small at all if you're Phoenix, and maybe they can go to Kaminsky, but is he going to hold his own against Jokic? Probably not. So all these guys, Crowder and Bridges too, I think perfectly fine plays, but the priorities to me, Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton, I think, is in line to have another good series. I think the Suns, to me, the most appealing fantasy team. And as Eric mentioned, the team probably to take the most overs from for prop betting as well.
Love it. I just got an alert saying my internet is unstable. So that's fun.
I could tell. No, I'm kidding. I could not tell this time around. My headphones have been like acting very, very strange recently.
Your headphones are glitchy. My internet is glitchy.
Our pets' heads are falling off.
Everything is falling apart.
I'm holding in pretty good. I feel like, but
oh, cool.
It's crazy though, because the one thing I always expect from a girl wearing leopard print is just pure stability at all times.
Leopard print, little Freudian slip. Print. If I had to
I was
say
excited
to
get the line out. Shut up, Eric.
Look at the lips. I mean, hi, Kayla. How are you?
Never dull moment with you two. That is for sure.
Pause.
Right. And to everyone out there, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to keep up with all of our shows, DFS offers, giveaways, and much more. Once you subscribe, hit that notification button too to get alerts when our shows go live so you don't miss the tip-off ever. Now we move on to Awesemo Tells the Future. Heading to the NFL, we had a massive trade in the NFL this weekend that resulted in Julio Jones being sent to the Tennessee Titans, creating a potential offensive juggernaut with Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown already in the house. So how do you guys think this team gels together? How do they stack up in the AFC South? And should they now be seen as a legitimate Super Bowl threat? Eric, we'll start with you.
Okay, so legitimate Super Bowl threat, I don't really know because football is played on both sides of the ball. It's obviously skewed more towards the offensive side. So yeah, we got to feel pretty darn good about this, but the Kansas City Chiefs still exist. That's still the team to be playing through. You're welcome. See, we're friends again. And I just don't see a way that, like right now, the numbers already dropped to a place where I just don't know if we need to necessarily be going that direction. But let me tell you, fantasy-wise, football-wise, everything else, like obviously this team, it just looks ridiculous. It makes me, of all things, want to bet Ryan Tannehill at plus 3,000 for MVP. And let me just give you the case. He has 2 wide receivers now, A.J. Brown and him. Corey Davis ain't no slouch either. That guy can play some football. I believe he's back, correct? Might not.
Corey Davis is on the Jets now.
Okay, so he's not there. I don't care. Julio Jones, give me him. Most receptions per yards run per route last year. A.J. Brown was 3rd, 2.76. Julio Jones, 6th, 2.70. The only guys who were even like remotely close to that as a tandem are Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, and it's not remotely close. So if you put those two together on a football team, And you're just telling me, along with Derrick Henry, the best running game that you have in the entire NFL, now combining with probably a top five passing game. They were already throwing the ball all around the lot at certain points last year. They basically schemed to whoever their opponents are. Like, they just do a really good job of being able to capitalize on that. But a run first team that then has AJ Brown, who is an absolute beast, and Julio Jones, like, who's going to ever want to be tackling this football team? Like, not me. I don't want to be out there trying to tackle those three. That's going to be pain and suffering. Good luck scheming against them. Offensively for fantasy, just a huge stock up. Ryan Tannehill, I'm probably going to start I was already taking him pretty high in some best ball drafts. That's going to be another avenue that I'm just going to continue to take, just stacking this entire team, because offensively, I don't know how you stop them. I just don't.
Yeah, I like this team a lot here. I think the Super Bowl odds I'd be willing to take, or they're actually just the odds to make the Super Bowl in terms of AFC winning odds. They are still in line. This is something I mentioned on the morning show with Greg, because we talked about it briefly. And Greg is so big, our pal Greg Ehrenberg, so big always on being efficient about lines and when they move and all of that. And I thought it was interesting that DraftKings Sportsbook tweeted out like, hey, the lines are so bad on the Titans. Like, why isn't anybody taking this bet? And it's like a marketing tool now. But even with the other books, the lines have moved a little bit, but it's still, you get plus 1,600 odds on some books for the Titans, which is right there in line with the Dolphins, and actually behind teams like the Colts and the Broncos. The Broncos line may be reflecting their chances here to get some Aaron Rodgers trade or something, but still, like, the fact that they're even in that tier is just, I think, disrespectful. One thing to keep in mind, though, is the defense is not great. I think this gives them a chance to win more games overall, to have the firepower to compete with Kansas City and all of that. But the defense allowed a lot of shootouts last year, and we're a team that I was targeting for portions of the year, and sometimes it would pay off, sometimes it wouldn't, because of the Titans kind of offering weird game scripts with Derrick Henry and all of that. But this spot, you're basically getting a Corey Davis replacing his routes with Julio Jones, and Corey Davis was actually pretty good last year and had a good amount of targets as well. It's a much more proficient team. I think the big losers here are in fantasy, where AJ Brown, I think, gets a bit less appealing, whereas if he would have been just a sole number one with only Josh Reynolds there behind him, that would have been massive for him. Same thing for Anthony Firkser at tight end, a guy who is basically going to be the only tight end. Now he's a tournament option every week, but I think this is a very clean stack for fantasy. I think for the betting odds too, if you have a book that isn't reflecting it, I just wouldn't mind taking that bet and hoping that they run hot to begin the year and maybe you can get a cash out. Like, I think that's something else that can be useful for everybody out there, but it's clearly a much better team. It was clearly an undervalued move, I think. And I think Eric's pick too for Ryan Tannehill as MVP, like, that does sound kind of crazy because it's such a loaded team, but Tannehill's been as efficient as everybody in the league on a per pass basis. There's also a new offensive coordinator who was also their former tight ends coach, but I think that's something that could change here, or maybe they air it out slightly more. Maybe they do just get some more check downs to Derrick Henry that pad out Tannehill's stats. There's a lot of ways for Tannehill to have some upside. So fantasy wise, I think the winner is going to be probably Julio in the situation. And certainly the overall winner is going to be Tannehill, just because of the fact that it's going to raise all the boats and he's the guy who's driving all the boats. I'll
also add one part to why I think that you're dead on why you should probably be betting them as a Super Bowl favorite as well. Remember, the playoffs got expanded. There are opportunities to cash in your bet much earlier than there has ever been before. Now that you have cash out options on a number of sports books, now that you have an expanded playoff, like, just getting to the playoffs is going to give you opportunity to plus 1,600. If we think that they're going to be 10-6 by any means, 11, it's like they could go 8-8 and still make the playoffs in the AFC South. So, like, I feel really good about looking at the rest of this division. Like the Colts, I don't really know what to expect from them. Obviously, you're looking at a wild card, absolute wild card, bringing in Wentz in there. Houston Texans terrible, Jacksonville Jaguars terrible. Like, they're going to stomp out the rest of that entire division. And so, like, if they can get themselves into the 1 or the 2 seed, I mean, you're looking at them only needing to win 2 games to move on in that spot, and you're going to have opportunities to be hedging out of it at every single spot, because if they get one of those top 2 in their weak division, where they're getting 6 kind of cream puff games here, depending on how good the Colts end up being with Wentz, like, you're looking at a great hedge out situation. So plus 1,600, I'm right on board with you. I'm just kind of talking through it on air.
Okay. Spags, did you want to add anything?
Did you pause again? Are you serious?
I didn't know Spags was going to interject.
Oh, okay.
No, I usually try to nod and go like, yeah. So like so I don't know. I do my thing to try to help the show along, but no, I'm good, Kayla. I feel like I can make more jokes about the leopard print, I guess. Or also the fact that our producer Jordan Klein has a new haircut, and I feel like he vaguely resembles a North Korean dictator of some sort, but I don't know if that's inappropriate to say.
Oh my goodness.
I've been thinking about the
Which
entire
one is
show.
that? I don't know many of them.
it's I guess you could pare it down a little bit more if you had to choose.
Hans Bricks.
Wowzers.
Hans Bricks.
He's got the glasses too. It's
Matt
a whole look. It's a whole
Damon.
look. Jordan knows it too. Like you can tell him looking down right now because he knows. He knows.
Oh my!
He's turning bright red.
He is so red. Can we get a live look in? We need producer Cam so bad right now. Oh, he is dead.
He's taking the glasses off.
Oh my gosh,
Damn
he's
it,
crying.
Hans Bricks. You mother trucker.
I did not see that coming. I
Team
have a question.
America. Have you ever seen Team America, Kayla?
What do you think?
Okay, that's a no.
I've
You hate
seen
everything that I like.
I've seen
realized.
snippets of it, but yeah, it doesn't seem like my kind of movie.
Probably not.
If Julia Roberts isn't starring in it, I probably haven't seen it.
Wow, she's not in that. I'm just gonna let you know.
It would have been a nice cameo though.
One of the greatest things. If you could tell me you would never die, I would have sex with you right now. I promise. I will never die. It's just the greatest scene ever. It's fine.
I'll take your word for it.
People clamoring for Jordan's face now, by the way. So I'm glad I could add to the look.
Show
You know,
your
on the
face.
show we like to build each other up. Now we're building up Jordan. Jordan's a superstar. People want to see him on cam. He refuses. The glasses have come off, and Jordan steadfastly refuses.
I was waiting for him to put on a hat. Like I was just completely rebel. Oh, it was so beautiful. Oh, now he can't even be in screen. Oh, we've made fun of him too much.
We love you, Jordan. Okay,
Lakers
I have a
are
question.
trash, buddy. Row. They're not even in the NBA right now. It's fine.
I have a question going back to Julio. This is kind of related. What happened to the whole Julio Aaron Rodgers tag team thing? Because obviously he's not going to Tennessee.
That was not viable, I think, from
No.
a contract standpoint, where there were too many. Like the Falcons were getting rid of Julio because he's too expensive. So the Titans are taking on like a large cap hold for him. I don't even know. They had to do some stuff financially to make that work that I'm actually not familiarized with. But there was no way to do that unless they went to a team with a lot of cap room, and I don't think that was ever an option.
And the Falcons they kind of knew that they were trending this direction with Calvin Ridley being a little bit younger and obviously just falling into a top 5 pick to be able to go and get Pitts. That ended up working out very, very well because you want to talk about a guy once in a generational talent. Tight ends, you always got to stay healthy. Like I always have to preach on that where it's like, man, you're blocking, you were in the trenches. Look at Gronk. Look how banged up he got. He had to take a year off football. You look at pretty much everybody down the line, like the days of having like a Gonzalez who can just go out and stay healthy throughout their career. It's just, yeah, you're welcome again. Just saying, playing to your heartstrings now. Those days are over because tight ends just get annihilated in modern football. And so I hope Pitts can just stay healthy because if he does, oh my God, he is unreal.
I would also say too, just to kind of tag that on, obviously we're talking more about the Titans and the betting implications and all that, but for best ball, I think Kyle Pitts, like I actually don't know what he's going at right now because I haven't started to dig into that stuff yet. Because to me, it's a little bit early, but if you're one of those people who's doing the best ball drafts right now, Kyle Pitts to me is a much bigger pick. Like Calvin Ridley is going to be the more obvious beneficiary. Calvin Ridley's also going to see more double coverage than he's ever seen in his life. Like he was getting a little bit more last year with Julio out, but Kyle Pitts is going to benefit. Russell Gage is going to benefit. Like the Falcons' weapons overall, I think are still going to be fine, but I think Ridley is going to take the big jump up, but Kyle Pitts to me is probably as valuable as anybody right now because he's going to get a lot of that Julio workload that would have been up in the air before.
All right. Do we get everything out about this that we wanted to?
Honestly, I'm just so excited for football. Like
I am too.
Unbelievable.
I've been talking about all day.
I'm shocked you haven't done any best ball specs because like this is the time you want to be jumping in because people's ADPs are all over the place and it gives you kind of a different portfolio. And I don't know, based off of how DraftKings did their best ball last year, I'm not like clamoring for best ball over there yet because they gave out all those free tickets that screwed up my life. But I think for like going to Underdog, take a look at that because it is really, really fun to just start getting that blood flowing again.
All right. Well, we are going to wrap up our NFL talk and head over to the Diamond for some of the top bets and plays on tonight's MLB DFS slate for biggest bat. Which of these top 4 odds getters on OddsShopper do you guys think is the best overall bet to hit a home run tonight? We've got Adam Duvall plus 270, Rafael Devers plus 285, Sal Perez plus 290, and Fernando Tatis plus 300. Eric, we'll start with you.
Oh gosh, you go to the guy who
Bags
didn't even like research base. So there we go. I was gonna say he got done. He covered for 2 hours the MLB slate. I've looked at it for like 20 minutes. So
but that's why
definitely
you go
to
first. You're going to bring a fresh perspective. You bring a whole different insight. And for me, I'll beat the drum I've been beating all day, which is that. So there's an interesting thing with Nick Pivetta on the slate where on FanDuel, if you're playing on there today, Nick Pivetta is a play that looks to me under-owned because it's very easy to get to Miami as a stack. So I think on FanDuel, I would try to get less of Miami as a stack and get more of Pivetta Pavetta just because I think he's undervalued because people just like to be lazy when making their optimizations. They want to get what looks clean, and Miami does look very clean on FanDuel. That said, a play that I like a lot today, who's going to be really owned in DFS, but is the leading odds getter here for home runs, is Adam Duvall. And Duvall, I've actually taken in this home run bet enough times, and I don't think he's come through once, but that just means he's due, really. The variance is bound to shake out my side, and Adam Duvall going against Pavetta. Pavetta's been getting hit pretty hard. He's also given up a 16-degree launch angle, which is right in around that sweet spot where you want to be to hit home runs. And Duvall's all lift. He has a 22.5-degree launch angle, so he's basically just knocking this ball in the air. It is a hot day at Boston. It is a fairly humid day at Boston with 89 degrees, 50-degree humidity percent, or 50% humidity out there as well. So in the spot, Pavetta, I think, is due for regression. Still a fine DFS play, but I think he gives up a home run, say, to somebody, and it's got to be Duvall based on the lineup they have, because really nobody else on Miami seems competent enough to hit a home run.
Spags, really quickly, what direction is the wind coming from today?
It's 13 miles per hour. I know I don't have the direction in my sheet, but I believe it's blowing out, if I can recall what was said earlier today.
Okay. Wow.
I can confirm if you want, Kayla. I know you love the weather here. You are dressed like a local meteorologist. I feel like who'd be killing it on the Fox daytime shift. So I feel like I have to look it up just for you.
That's pretty accurate. Eric, your turn.
What the the Rafael Devers, Bobby Dahlbeck. If you want to get super weird, he's in the 9 hole. He just has crazy power. He's going to start hitting better. Here we go. Let's just bet all of the Boston Red Sox up against Thompson, who I didn't know existed until today. So that's never good. If you're just kind of looking up and down and hasn't pitched yet, and you're looking through AAA, like Zach Thompson, it's not going to go well for him. So play all the Boston bats, but specifically Rafael Devers. And who's the other guy that I really like? Yeah, Bobby Dahlbeck.
Yeah, the wind's blowing out, Kayla. So there you go. It is blowing out. So it's a good day in Boston to be hitting some balls around, I'd say.
Love it.
Man.
Keep that in mind, everybody. All right, now for biggest arm, which of these top 4 odds getters on OddsShopper do you think is the best strikeouts over bet tonight? We've got Nick Pavetta, 6.5 strikeouts. Adbert Alzole.
You had it before.
We literally talked through it. I said it was coming up later in the show, and I knew there was a 99.9% chance. I was like, maybe I won't include him because it's only a 4. No, I had to include him. I had to.
Adbert Alzole, 6.5 strikeouts. I just have to slow down.
Was it that hard?
No, it wasn't. Pablo Lopez, 5.5. Dylan Bundy, 5.5. Eric.
Yeah, we're going to kind of go to you can talk about Pavetta all you want, but he's got the highest strikeout per 9 over the course of the last year here, going up against the Miami lineup. Going to have strikeouts. He could definitely run into some issues. Also the highest whip on the slate. What a crazy dichotomy he is, or a contradiction, if you will. Kind of reminds me of, I don't know, all these pitchers that have crazy strikeout rates, but then give up hard contact. But Nick Pavetta, I'll probably take the over on him, but go ahead and throw some batters on the other side of it, especially in DFS, where I find it almost impossible if you're playing large field GPPs not to at least have like one batter on the other side of it on a 2 or 3 game slate.
Yeah, it's also worth noting Pablo Lopez is still on the odds for OddsShopper, was scratched today because there aren't odds for the replacement, Zach Thompson. So no Pablo Lopez. And I'm with you. I think Pavetta is the best play. I think he's the most volatile play. To me, he looks desperately due for negative regression, but he does have a 27.4% K rate on the year. It also just has a better matchup than Adbert Alzole has, who's right around the same range in terms of K rate, but it's facing San Diego, has a lot of dangerous power. And Alzole also struggles against lefties. Like, he's a fine DFS play. He's going to be as good as anybody on the slate. But Pavetta, I think, for just pure strikeout numbers, he's also pitching the deepest out of all these guys today, throwing 96 pitches per plate appearance, or per appearance in a game rather, this year. That's a pretty good mark there. So just, you're getting the time, you're getting a good matchup. Miami also strikes out at a 26% clip on the year against righties. So I think just on its face, Pavetta's the best play, but just a play too, where I think if you're getting less of them for whatever reason in your DFS sites today, I think just taking Pavetta for the strikeout odds is probably the best one, because you can get tuned up a little, give up some home runs, but easily get there in terms of strikeouts.
It's now time to head back to the NBA for No House Advantages, prop or not. We're going to check out some of their top props of the day for NBA key players. So guys, do we like the over or under on them, and how many points would you assign? First up, we've got Kyrie Irving, 3.5 assists. Spags, we're going to throw it back to you.
The Kyrie Irving mark to me seems like it has to be a very strong over today. Kyrie all year long does, sort of normalize with his assist rate in court time without James Harden. And I think it's just shy of a 30% assist rate on the year without Harden, which is basically in line with the season average. And those numbers do take a drop off when Harden's in there, because Harden's the point guard. But now Kyrie is going to be the point guard. Like, Mike James will take some possessions away. Bruce Brown will run a few plays. Obviously, Kevin Durant's going to get a lot of ISO ball. But I think this is a really strong one. Looks like Awesemo also has it as the top one on the board. So to me, this is probably clear 10-pointer on No House Advantage, and I don't think there's a lot that are going to be even that close.
Somebody said Pat Mahomes thinks Eric sounds like Kermit, which just made me giggle because that's hilarious. That is honestly shots fired, but respect. You know what? I'll take it because I don't know. It could be worse. Could it? No, it probably couldn't be worse in that spot. That's about as bad as it gets. Moving on, Kyrie Irving over 3.5 assists. Absolutely. You're seeing that assist rate spike. Well, no James Harden. It's a big deal. That's a lot of production. That's a lot of potential assists that are left on the board there. 3.5 is way, way, way too low. That's why it's the best number on the board. Pretty straightforward. Play him in one of your top spots.
All right. Sorry, I thought I started with Eric.
Oh my God.
That was my bad. Blake Griffin, 14.5 points plus rebounds plus assists, Eric.
I'm upset.
Now
it's fine. It's fine. No, I'm being dramatic. Yeah. So Blake Griffin, we got to just trust these minutes. 35. I don't think he gets maybe he does get to 35 again. I don't know. He played phenomenally well. I got to think 25 plus is already on the board there for him, playing substantially more minutes that first game than he did any time during the Boston series. But again, no James Harden. If he's going to be effective out there, he's going to play 20. I would say his absolute floor is like 24 and could play upwards at 35 again, 36. So anything in that range, within that range is phenomenal for his prospects here. 14.5 points plus rebounds plus assists with no James Harden on a court. Absolutely.
Yeah, Blake, the one thing that jumped out to me when going through his rates earlier today was that he actually does get a rebound boost in court time without James Harden. Harden's been about a 12% rebound rate guy. That coming off the floor actually bumps Blake up to just shy of a 12% rebound rate guy, which he really hasn't been any stop this year. And I think that's something that does add more value to him. So the fact this prop includes the rebounds as well as the assists and the points, I think makes it a good one. And I think, even if there are pathways for Griffin to play a few less minutes, he was, as I mentioned, on pace for 37 yesterday if the game hadn't been blown out in the last 2 minutes. So even if he does run bad and even if there's some foul trouble or whatever, you're probably still looking at 28 minutes as a floor. And I would say at least 25. And I think he's able to get there. Like he had 20% usage in that last game. Clearly there was still more than enough to go around for everybody else in that lineup. Kyrie and Kevin Durant got their shots up. So I think in the spot, Blake Griffin, even though I think I have some concerns with him for DFS relative to the ownership, for No House Advantage, you don't have to worry about that. You're just playing a peer-to-peer format on there where you just want to get the picks right. You just want to get these props in place. And to me, this Blake Griffin one, if you don't like the Kyrie, it could be a 10-pointer, but to me, I think on No House Advantage, this one's a 9-pointer today.
And last but not least, we've got PJ Tucker, 2.5 points, Spags.
So PJ Tucker did pick up that start last game and honestly would play pretty well relative to what we expect of PJ Tucker. So I don't mind taking the over on this one. I have him projected for 4.3 points today. And that's honestly, I think, conservative based on what we saw last game where he actually was getting some shots up, at least in that first quarter of run. Does seem like there's also pathways for him to get a few more minutes as well if he's running good defensively. And he's basically the only obstacle they have to keep Kevin Durant wrapped up besides dedicating Giannis to him full time. And that did not seem like something they wanted to do last game. So in the spot, to me, PJ Tucker, not the most comfortable over you'll have. To me, because of that, it's probably closer to a 5 or 6 pointer, even though that I think Awesemo may have it a little bit higher. But I think PJ Tucker, it's an over, and it's probably one of the ugliest overs you'll hit.
If you love props, there is nothing more fun than the sweat on one guy to make 1-3. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's a half 3-point prop, I absolutely love those. You just fire it up. A dude who plays 28 minutes in that first game, and PJ Tucker was notorious for knocking down corner threes back in the day with Houston. It is a real sweat because you're going to watch 28 minutes of a dude standing in a corner doing nothing, like legitimately doing nothing on the offensive end. And there will be nothing like it. So the 2.5 points, absolutely give me the over, but absolutely best of luck to us all, because that is just going to be, that's going to be a real brutal sweat. He's got to be in the starting lineup. If he is not in the starting lineup, just avoid this prop entirely. But otherwise, the over in 2.5, which isn't showing up here right now, but he's definitely projected for a little bit more than the 2.5 here on the front end. I've got him in for 4. I think Spags said 4.2 was the number that I heard. So
4.3.
Yeah. So let's have some fun. Let it ride. Let's hit the over.
Let's hit the over. And as always, friends, don't forget to play on No House Advantage, our sponsor, who is taking a different spin on daily fantasy sports by offering player prop contests across the NBA, MLB, NFL, and PGA for cash prizes. Download the No House Advantage app today and use promo code Awesemo to receive a deposit bonus of up to $20 for new signups. Be your friends, not the house. Win big with player props today. And now, back by popular demand, it is time for the Pirate Parlay. Here we go. The Parlay Pirate and his parrot parody are back to win more, so listen up carefully. To which 2 teams you should take to the bank? Will they stay high and dry, or will they walk the plank? Eric. Dazzle us.
I got to get this on the front end. Here we are. The leprechaun pirate is back in action. I do not even care. Hey, Spags, I've got a question for you. How do pirates prefer to communicate? Eye to eye.
Damn it. Okay.
Kayla, why is pirating so addictive?
I'm not good at these. I don't know.
They say once you lose your first hand, you get hooked. What has 8 legs, 8 arms, and 8 eyes? 8 pirates. Of course, you mateys. Oh, we're going to... Oh. Yes? Parody has the winners. Milwaukee money line, Suns money line. Lock it in. We take all the treasure, me mateys. Good day. That's all.
I don't even know what you just said, actually. I'm just looking at Spag's face.
I just feel like those jokes must have been straight from the poop deck.
Wow. Wow.
Wow, look at us. Bunch of comics. Not me, but you guys.
I hate you.
Yeah, I think the bets are fine though. That's it's a reasonable.
I think the bets are fun.
Parlay.
Cool, bro.
Like,
awesome.
I don't pirates seem to do a lot of illegal activities, so maybe they have, maybe there is some longitudinal ties to bookmaking back when that was illegal. So I could support that as well. And I'm never mad at Eric bringing a bit to the table. You'll never hear me complain. Sometimes they make me die inside to varying degrees, but if this man's going to put on a pirate hat and put on a parrot, which I requested as well, and wear a hook, you'll get no gripes from this man right here. We need more pirates on this YouTube channel, not less.
Spags, I bet with your hair down and in that pirate hat, you would look a lot like Captain Jack Sparrow.
Honestly, I would take that. I don't know if he does do the man. What is it? What do they call it with the eye? Guy liner. He does do the guy liner.
Yes.
I have thick like eyelashes and such. So I've never done the guy liner, and I don't know how that would go. I've got concerns.
I'm learning a lot about you right now. This is great.
Eric, where are you with guy liner?
Oh, he's done it once or twice. You just know.
Maybe once or twice.
Maybe especially those baby blues, got to make them pop.
Oh yeah,
really bad eggs. It's fine.
All right. Well, that was a delight. Thank you, Eric.
You're so very welcome. Nobody can ever say that I'm not willing to look like a moron, like an absolute.
No one's saying that. No one's saying you're not.
Yep, absolutely. On the daily. By the way, Prop Report, check it out. Slate Starter article. Check them out here. We'll have all the winners for you, but the Pirate Parlay, he shows up on Mondays. Mondays are his day, and Monday we shall take all the money.
And the Wednesday bit, of course, will be
my God,
much awaited, much anticipated return of Puppet Lindquist. I know Carlos Manzo in the chat apparently dying to see Puppet Lindquist back, and I know a lot of you are too. So maybe come in Wednesday if you want to see him make a return. And again, Puppet Lindquist was 3-0 in his picks. That's showing off. I think Dr. Ben Ross has got somebody coming for his head if Puppet Lindquist.
Too bad nobody could understand them. That was the problem. Nobody could bet them because well, you play him and you play him and it's on.
Eric, I think I've got some fun bits planned with Puppet Lindquist coming up on Wednesday. I've done my pre-thought.
So you win 53K and you bring an ensemble. You're going to be switching out 45 puppets live on air. Tune in on Wednesday.
Like forgetting Sarah Marshall. Weird. I'm just doing a whole.
Yes.
Die. One of the greatest movies ever.
I love that movie. Oh my gosh. So good. Well, everyone, yes. Come back.
My cereal, she makes me I get the freshest cereal. It's fine. Nobody knows that one.
Nope.
You shall not pass. There it is.
This is definitely a Monday show, isn't it, folks?
It is.
All right. Heading over to Good Dog, Bad Dog.
Oh, that's sad.
In real life, there is no such thing as a bad dog, and betting in DFS, there are a lot of underdogs who may have no chance in their game. So who's a good dog to target tonight and who's a bad one? We lost a lot of dogs here for this segment. Just one dog is left. Spags, give us your good dog.
My good dog, I'll actually go to baseball for my good dog. I think the Cubs get to Ryan Weathers today. Ryan Weathers is one of those pitchers who just seems like he's due for worse days than he's had, not getting strikeouts, not missing bats at all in the Cubs. At least, we don't know what the lineup is yet, but a team that does have a lot of quality bats you can get to a lefty. So in this spot, to me, I think I'll go to MLB, and I think I've actually hit a really good rate on my MLB bets, which is funny because I don't
really
bet MLB
have.
At all.
You've been unreal.
And I will take the Cubs to win this one. And if they win again, then maybe I'll start tracking it more fully. But I'm happy to go against Ryan Weathers today.
I was going to say you have 48 million spreadsheets. You got to just add the one MLB where you just write in on the input. Did I win? Yes. Then you fire it up and you'll look really cool because you actually have been completely on fire. We talked about my good dog, bad dog a little bit. Good dog is going to absolutely be Milwaukee. I got them at +2. Now they're the favorites. So I guess that probably doesn't go that direction, but I don't care. That's what I'm doing.
And tell us about your bad dog.
Bad dog, definitely going to be Denver. I think they get absolutely clobbered in this first game. So Phoenix, between Mikal Bridges and Jay Crowder, I've been doing some digging on Jay Crowder defensively because he's been very, very impressive. And look, what's the one piece that the Heat were missing this entire season? Jay Crowder. Jay Crowder is a big hole to fill. The dude comes in and he can guard every single position. He completely debilitated anything LeBron James wanted to do. LeBron James isn't 100%, so I'm going to say that on the front end. But in the bubble, Jay Crowder was magnificent for Miami, played so well defensively in this Lakers series. I think Jay Crowder is going to absolutely put the clamps down. I said, I like Michael Porter Jr. That's more of a volume-based field that I have for Michael Porter Jr. He's going to get his shots off. He's going to have spots there, but between Jay Crowder and Mikal Bridges, those are two massively, they're positive defenders. Like, they're incredible. I'm going to really side with Phoenix here. In props, I'm taking the over on all their points props. I think that this one gets really, really wonky, and then Denver has to come back in, make some adjustments, maybe go play a little bit bigger in game 2, but I just think they get ran out of the gym today.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about taking Denver as my good dog because I agree. Like, Phoenix can have a really easy time scoring buckets, and that's what gives me concern because Devin Booker was just a world beater in that last series, and obviously people saw in the last game. But I think he's just a guy who's ready to really make this playoff run, his playoff run in a lot of ways, and getting Chris Paul healthier comes with some risk. So yeah, I could support your takes there. I think to me though, Brooklyn is the one that I'm just going to take as a bad dog, and it's only a 1-point spread, so it doesn't really matter. But I wouldn't bet it. I wouldn't take him to win, and I do think Milwaukee would have been nice if they were an underdog here, and they could have been my good dog, but clearly the line has swung the other way, and I think that's with good reason. Milwaukee, not fully healthy. They don't have Dante DiVincenzo, but healthier than the Nets are with losing one of their big pieces here, and they still have two superstars, two megastars, I think, even if Kyrie isn't quite a top 10 guy. But I do think Milwaukee wins this one. This series to me just seems like it's predestined to go 7 games, and Milwaukee, I think, is going to be game to do their part and will come out pretty aggressive. So I just don't see how Brooklyn wins this.
These last 5 minutes always fly by so fast. Okay, Spags, give us your make or break.
My make or break for the day will honestly probably still be playing Blake Griffin and Mike James a good amount, because I do think even though there are pivot plays, you still have to play these guys at least with the field. They are value plays that open up everything else. They're your pathway to fit Giannis, or maybe even a pathway to fit Giannis and also fit Jokic together, or whatever pairings of stars you want. I think that's sort of the thing that you have to go to here. So it sucks. They're chalky. I think come with some risk that we talked about earlier in the show. I'll find the pivot plays as well, but I will be at least with the field on these guys, and I think that's just the way you have to play it today.
Yeah, that'll be my make or break. I think for me personally, looking at my exposures, it's just, it's very, very early, but looks like I'm going to be way over the field on Drew Holiday. That's going to be one of the big stands I'm taking. I think he plays phenomenally well. I think he ends up being a 7 for 19 last time out. 17 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. Didn't get to the line, only 3 free throw attempts. That's the one thing that's been a little concerning for him. Hasn't been that aggressive going to the 10 over the course of the playoffs, but phenomenal defender. I think Drew Holiday has a really big game on both sides of the floor. Looking forward to it.
And last but not least, Eric, your fade of the day is?
Oh, man. It's got to be Denver outside of Jokic and a little bit of Michael Porter Jr. I'm probably going to have just about no Denver outside of it.
I think for me, man, it's tough because I really do think the ownership's pretty good. It'll probably end up being Austin Rivers. Like, he still projects well for me, but there's going to be other guys in the range. And right now we have Austin Rivers projected to be in about 1/4 of lineups. So, I don't feel great about that one, but relative to the ownership, I guess he's the one chalk guy. Maybe Mikal Bridges too. I feel like that's one that I move away from because I am more of a believer, much like Eric and Jay Crowder, than Mikal Bridges. So I think that's another one. Those two guys to me just seem overowned.
There you have it, folks. That's going to do it for us here on the tip-off on this Monday. Thanks for sticking with us through that.
Easy.
Fun as always with my guys, Chris Spags, Eric Lindquist. Thank you both. Thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. We will be back with you tomorrow on the tip-off at 4 Eastern, I believe. Yes, 4 Eastern. And as always, the Deeper Dive and Live Before Lock are coming your way next, so don't go anywhere. I'm Kayla Knierim. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
North Korean dictator.
Yeah, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA Deeper Dive. I'm Dave Loughran on Twitter at Lafayette_D, joined by Adam Scherer at ShipMyMoney DFS, breaking down a 2-game slate here. One brand new series, another one that we haven't talked about yet since it was over the weekend. Finally, nice to freshen it up a little bit, huh?
Yeah, nice to get a change. And even the Milwaukee-Brooklyn game is completely different than we talked about Saturday morning because now there's no James Harden.
Yeah, for sure. It's no different than the actual game, though, since you only played 40 seconds.
Right. Yeah. We definitely have – we can look back and see, like, kind of at least to some extent what to expect, but it's at least different than we talked about.
Yeah, it should be fun. I'm looking forward to diving into both of these. I mean, we had gotten to a point where we had talked about the same games like anywhere from 4 to 7 times.
Yeah, it just turns into this guy shot really bad last game. He probably won't shoot that bad again playing, and that's, like, all that you're adding at that point. Curious
to know if that's your take on Chris Middleton today, but – when it comes to the postseason, he kind of just does that. So we'll see. We got a lot to dive into with James Harden being out, of course, playing less than a minute in game one. The line, a little bit of line movement on these games today, which is somewhat surprising. Not as much, not a ton of line movement, but enough to at least make it an interesting topic of conversation. And we're happy to have everybody with us. As always, hit that thumbs up. It is the easiest way to help support us, and we appreciate it greatly. Make it the first thing you do. You walk in here, virtually come in the door and you hit the thumbs up. Very simple. And then I don't want to have to ask you anymore. Subscribe to the channel too. That actually helps us more than the thumbs up. The thumbs up just looks cooler as it's happening, and hit the notification bell if you haven't done so. All right. So we have 2 games to talk about before we jump into the actual games, before we get into Milwaukee, Brooklyn, Denver, Phoenix. Same question I always throw at you. You have a few high-priced guys. You have Giannis, you have Jokic, you have no Harden, which leaves Durant and Kyrie Irving in much more appealing spots. Devin Booker coming off a 47-point game. But really, there's 3 guys in that upper echelon, the highest priced tier. Can we go stars and scrubs today on DraftKings and or Fanduel? I know there's some wild pricing differences on guys like, we'll get into it. But do you go stars and scrubs? Can we go balance? Should we just go 1 star player and then kind of round it out outside of there? How are you kind of approaching this from cash and from tournaments?
I think it's really site dependent, as you alluded to, because there's some really underpriced guys on DraftKings, not necessarily guys that you're super confident are going to do well, but guys that are at a price point where there's just not a lot of risk. You know, Mike James, Bruce Brown, even Austin Rivers at 4K. And like all of these guys, Monte Morris too at 5,400. But whereas on like FanDuel, they're all $1,000 or close to $1,000 one way or the other, more expensive. And so it's going to make it tougher. Like if I just crunch lineups on FanDuel, not, doing anything other than using Alex's projections, it's mostly giving me lineups where I have like one of Jokic, one of Giannis, one of Durant, like one of those pay up guys. And then it's going a little bit more balanced outside of that. Whereas on DraftKings, it looks like it's a lot easier to get to 2 of those pay up guys, whether, between Kyrie, Giannis, Jokic, and Durant. I think it's a lot easier to get to 2 of them because there's just a lot of guys that are way less expensive on DraftKings than on FanDuel.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I was getting at. We're going to hit on all of them, but there's some huge differences in price points across both sites. So time to talk about all of that. Before we do though, it's probably also a good time to say hi to our sponsor. Now we've talked about Monkey Knife Fight before, but it's probably, let's get it out of the way now and get you guys over there to check it out so you can try it tonight before you get any of your other lineups in, or really whenever you want. It's sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight. They got player prop based contests that are super easy to play and don't require the time commitment that other DFS sites require in order to be competitive. You get those in, and then hell, you can go over to DraftKings, FanDuel, however you want to do it. With Monkey Knife Fight, you're in charge. Whether you want NBA, UFC, PGA, esports, or soccer, they got it all. Monkey Knife Fight also has, they screwed that one up. To get started, head over to monkeyknifefight.com and choose which game you want to play, contest type, and your buy-in. Even better, Monkey Knife Fight has an instant first match deposit bonus of $100 when you sign up with promo code Awesemo. It's $100 when you use promo code Awesemo when you first sign up. New users also take advantage of a free game to win $18. Just correctly select which player has more points, and you have to see which one it is tonight. Go over there, use the promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO. All right, so Milwaukee and Brooklyn. Let's dive straight into this one with the Bucks. And the first question I'll ask you, ahead of anything else, how does Brooklyn find a way to stop the Milwaukee Bucks? Oh, I'm sorry. How does Brooklyn find a way to stop Giannis Antetokounmpo at the rim? Because it feels like last game, they kind of just gave him what he wanted and then sealed everything else off and forced Middleton to shoot 6 for 23.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's kind of what they're probably going to do until that doesn't work anymore. Like, I do think this is a series where maybe you do see a little bit more Nicholas Claxton at some point than you saw earlier, or than you saw in the first round. Maybe DeAndre Jordan gets back into the rotation, but Claxton's the guy that I think would be most likely to step up there. But I think first they're going to just kind of say, okay, well, if we can contain Holiday, if we can contain Middleton, Giannis isn't going to win this game single-handedly, even with Harden out. Brooklyn's still a very good team. So that's kind of my expectation is at least for now, Giannis is just going to get his, because there's no real easy answer outside of, what we've seen teams like the Sixers, like the Celtics do in previous postseasons, and just, pack the paint against Giannis. He's still going to have a big game normally. But it forces these other guys to knock down shots. I think that, it's probably going to be similar here, where there's no one guy on the Nets that's going to take Giannis out of the game. It's just a matter of containing everyone else.
Right. And there's ways, we've talked about this, you and I, many times in the past. There's been ways where coaches will just let a player score and you'd think, oh, well, you're crazy. And I don't say let a player score, let him walk to the rim, but not focus as much defensive attention on him in order to stop the rest of the team. If you're the Brooklyn Nets, even without James Harden, you have some really good 3-point shooters. Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Joe Harris can put you away when he's on. They got a lot of guys that can knock down threes and just throw in a barrage of shots from beyond the arc and put you in a massive hole. The issue I had, and I mentioned it with Josh on the strategy show this morning, Monday through Sunday, every day of the week, 10 o'clock Eastern. Check it out. Very fun show. You'll have some fun. But the point I was making today is what the Warriors used to do on those multiple championship runs. They would let players, especially post-up players, get their work. They'd let them score in the post, because why not? They're going to come and they're going to rain threes down upon you with Clay, with Curry, and then, of course, with Kevin Durant when he joined the squad. It feels like this could be a scenario where they sell out, not to stop Giannis, but to stop the other team, the Bucks, from being able to rain down threes upon them. And if that's the case, Giannis is going to get all of his buckets, but will it be enough? It definitely wasn't in game one, even without James Harden.
Right. And I think that's a really good point. I mean, obviously the math works out to where as long as, the Bucks 3-point shooters are doing well, Giannis can pretty much do whatever he wants, and 3 is greater than 2, and they're going to win. So, yeah, I mean, and on top of that, I mean, it's just, there's only so much you can do outside of, again, just leaving half of the Bucks team wide open for 3. There's only so much you can do to really stop Giannis, individually.
Right. Where does he rank among the top price guys for you today?
So I think it's interesting because he's on a per minute basis. He's similar to Jokic. They're about the same price, similar playing time expectations. Durant, I think I would like to get to Durant. He's a little bit cheaper and not the same level of production, but with Harden out, you do get a nice bump for him. The thing that ends up, or at least that in the lineup I made before the show for DraftKings, it kind of just ended up being where I could go Durant, but I also could just go to Giannis and it didn't matter. So in that case, if salary doesn't matter, Giannis is the number one guy, I think. But to me, there's not really a big difference. If I'm not going to sacrifice too much to get from Jokic to Giannis, I'm not going to sacrifice all that much to get from Durant to Giannis either.
All right. So the big question now is Chris Middleton, right? Coming off another heinous playoff performance. We went over his numbers this morning from last postseason. They were not pretty. I mean, there were some really ugly numbers mixed in there. 51% true shooting in the postseason. And, now against Miami, he was fine, right? He was fine, but the shot volume was relatively low. He didn't really need to do much. He was required to do very little in these games outside of game one, where they ran all over them. But against Brooklyn, 6 for 23, he was blanked from 3-point range, 0 for 5, 1 of 2 from the free throw line. He did rack up 13 rebounds, which salvaged his line a little bit. But I guess on one hand, you're saying, well, he attempted 23 shots. He was definitely still very involved. He's still the number 2 on this team. But then the other side of me is saying Chris Middleton's postseason record, especially when it comes to facing decent teams, isn't particularly great. So do we have to go back to him today on a 2-game slate, or can we get away from him a little bit with maybe some other guys in a similar price range?
I think the concerns are kind of baked into the price here. He's not really that expensive. So, he's not the first guy I'm looking to. Obviously, I'm looking to get up to at least one of these stars. I'm looking, there's a lot of value, especially on DraftKings from a point per dollar standpoint. That's going to, satisfy what I'm looking for there. But 8,100 for Middleton on DraftKings, 7,700 on Fanduel. So he's actually $100 less expensive at small forward than Michael Porter Jr. I still don't have any issues going there. I mean, he's averaged 1.05 DraftKings points per minute this postseason. He's averaged between 35 and 36 minutes per game. If you just take that as the expectation, you're still getting reasonable production, not great production, but reasonable production for his salary to where, if it's a 2-game slate. So like there's still limited options. But that being said, I do think the playoff concerns are at least somewhat legitimate. Like he's struggled for a while and really just hasn't played well. And you even saw it this year in a lot of games where like he needed to step up and everyone expected him to step up and he just didn't do it. So I do think it's a legitimate concern, but I'd be a lot more concerned about it from a DFS standpoint if he were, 9,100 on DraftKings and 8,700 on FanDuel, for example.
For sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess the question, and Sam Van Dam, welcome to Team Awesemo, brother. You guys want to join Team Awesemo? You'll see it down there with the join button right there. Check out the perks that are involved with that. It's $2.99, pocket change. Not for everyone, but for plenty of people. And if you don't want to join, no obligation. This content is going to be free regardless. With Middleton, like you said, there are concerns, but then once you start looking at some of the other guys priced around them, and I don't want to get too much into the next game because we always go game by game here on the Deeper Dive, then Live Before Lock jumps around a little bit, hits on some relevant points, any injury news, takes your questions. It's a nice combination. It works well. But like Devin Booker is on DraftKings, $400 more. Drew Holiday's $300 less. All three of them have shooting guard eligibility. So what do you think that does for ownership today on somebody like Middleton?
I'm expecting it to be pretty spread out between the three. I just pulled up DraftKings ownership right now. Booker at 39%, Holiday at 34%, Middleton at 28%. So a little bit of a gap.
Up around 50.
What'd you say?
And Irving up around 50. So on a 2-game slate, Middleton's fourth at his own position.
Yeah, and on DraftKings, I think Irving at shooting guard is extremely valuable because if you look at who is shooting guard eligible and their prices on FanDuel, it's a really, really bad position there. But on DraftKings, because of multi-position eligibility, you get a lot of these guys. But I think Irving is the clear number one. But out of that Booker, Holiday, Middleton group, separated by about 10 percentage points, I don't have a very strong lean. Like I think Booker probably plays the most minutes out of the group. Budenholzer played Holiday and Middleton about 36 minutes. They lost almost 4 minutes to garbage time last game. But Booker averaged over 40 minutes in that in the Lakers series. So I think he plays the most minutes. These guys produce it at relatively similar levels. Between Holiday and Middleton, I really think it's just in tournaments, play the lower owned one, in cash games, play whichever one fits in your lineup. But Holiday, I do feel a little bit better about Holiday just because he hasn't really had the productivity struggles that we've seen from Middleton this year. But I think it's very, very close, and there really shouldn't be too big of an ownership gap. So
let's assume that last game wasn't a 19-point game with like 5 minutes to go, right? Let's just assume that's the case. About 4 minutes to go. You would have gotten 40 minutes from Giannis. You would have had, Holiday played 37. So he would have played like 41, maybe a little more, 41, 42. And then Chris Middleton would have gotten up around 40 as well. So if that's the case tonight and it's competitive, I assume it will be. The line moved from plus 1.5 plus 1.5 Bucks to actually laying a point on the road. So it looks like that line's moved a couple points at least over the course of the day. Do you think these guys all get to 40 minutes in the event that it's competitive?
If it's competitive, yeah. I mean, I don't want to say like, yeah, definitely 40, but I think like that 38 to 40 range. I mean, Budenholzer does have a history of being a little bit underwhelming with the playing time in the postseason. Haven't seen it necessarily quite as much so far this postseason. It was obviously a big talking point after last year when they lost. So, I think that like if the Milwaukee game goes down to the wire and the Phoenix game goes down to the wire, I would guess that Booker plays more minutes than Middleton and Drew by, 1 or 2. But I do think that that the Milwaukee guys still end up around 40 minutes if it is close.
I do like Milwaukee today, personally. I think when you're just looking at the performance last time, and when it comes to Chris Middleton, I've been critical of him in the postseason because it's frustrating. But they shot 20% from 3 last game, 20%. from 3-point range. Even if Brooklyn does what I'm assuming they'll likely do, and give you twos to get threes, I still feel like 20% 3-point shooting for a Bucks team that has been very, very proficient in that respect all season long is a pretty tough thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if the Bucks weren't capable of shooting threes, this team wouldn't be as good as it is, throughout the course of the regular season, because Giannis, again, like we've talked about, he's extremely good in a variety of ways, but there is a clear way to slow him down at least a little bit and force other guys on this team to beat you. If they weren't capable of doing that, this wouldn't be considered as good a team as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Brooklyn Nets have been the best 3-point shooting team in the entire postseason, which is zero surprise whatsoever. But Bucks on the year were 4th in 3-point percentage. That's not surprising to me either. So I think, if anything, you're getting a close game here. I don't see any way, and crazier things have happened. I don't see any way the Bucks are emptying the bench. Budenholzer are emptying the bench with 4 minutes to go. That to me would be crazy, with the Bucks having a chance to get a win in Brooklyn without James Harden, with him presumably coming back at some point in the series. So you talked a little bit about Holiday, just to get a little bit further here. He also didn't have the greatest shooting game. It wasn't nearly as glaring as Middleton, but 2 for 7 from 3, 36% overall. Again, you would expect a better game from Holiday in another 40 minutes in a close spot. What do we do with him at sub 8K on DraftKings?
Yeah, I mean, I think the salary looks good for him. He's averaged about 1.1 DraftKings or 1.15 DraftKings points per minute during the regular season, the games he's played with Middleton and with Giannis. The playing time should be there. Like I said, I feel a little bit better about him than I do Middleton, just because he's been less likely to disappear, and he is a little bit less expensive as well. So I do really like Holiday here. Again, on DraftKings, where you can roster him at shooting guard, that's going to be the most valuable spot to get to him. But on FanDuel, at 8,400 at point guard, it's still a good option. The problem is just that you're going to run into, he's at the same position as Kyrie Irving. So it just makes him relatively a little bit less valuable, since you have to roster him there.
What are you doing with the rest of the Bucks tonight outside of the big three?
Yeah, so we'll have to keep an eye on the starting lineup here. We got PJ Tucker starting in place of DiVincenzo last game. He played about 28 minutes. DiVincenzo out again tonight. My expectation is that Tucker starts and plays 28 to 32 minutes, give or take, assuming that he plays relatively well. He's 3,200 on DraftKings. So as much as it sucks, that's another value piece you can go to, just because he is so cheap. On FanDuel, he is at power forward and 3,800. So still a reasonable value, but not quite as useful at that price and that position, because you have a few other relatively cheap guys, Blake Griffin, Jay Crowder, Aaron Gordon, being the three that I was referring to. So assuming Tucker starts, he's a reasonable value, especially on DraftKings. Beyond that, Brook Lopez probably plays around 30 minutes in a competitive game. He's around a 0.9 fantasy point per minute guy, which is fine. If you're looking to pivot away, like in larger field tournaments, if you get PJ Tucker starting, he's probably going to be really popular. It is PJ Tucker. I'm pretty sure everyone that's ever played DFS is well aware of what PJ Tucker is capable of doing in 30, 32 minutes or so. So you can certainly pivot to someone like Pat Connaughton at a cheap price tag. Like if Tucker were to lose minutes, they probably go to Connaughton.
Okay. Let's pivot over to Brooklyn. Then Thomas says Harden hit a lot of those threes. I'm assuming you're referring to the fact that they had the highest 3-point percentage in the postseason, and I'm assuming the regular season too. Harden was the 7th best 3-point shooter on the Nets this year. So, he hit a lot of them, but he also shot a ton of them. As far as efficiency goes, he didn't contribute to efficiency at all. He was a 36.5% 3-point shooter. What do you think? Durant was a 45% 3-point shooter this year. Jeff Green, 41. Kyrie Irving was 40%. What do you think Joe Harris was?
48.
47.5%.
Yeah, he's absurd.
That guy can bury you if he gets hot.
Yeah, he's one of those guys where he always gets overlooked in DFS because that's all he's going to do on that team, and it doesn't really matter. But yeah, he's an incredibly good shooter.
But in a real life perspective, if Joe Harris gets hot early on, he can pile up 20 on you in a half.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's a really important part of this team too, which, seems really weird when you talk about Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden, Joe Harris. It's Joe Harris really does matter for this team.
I'd argue he's even more important when one of these big three goes down, because you still have someone that you can get the ball to, even in spot up situations, to get good shots off, good looks, and be relied upon to score.
Yeah, without a doubt. Because I mean, his usage goes up at least a little bit if you take one of these guys off the floor, and he's incredibly efficient. So yeah, you're just getting a couple extra looks from an extremely efficient shooter.
For sure. Let's talk about Bergen. We got 242 likes. We are what, 58 away from the 300 mark here on a Monday. I know we're all miserable on Monday, but make us happier at least. 58 away. We can make that happen quite easily. Putting out some free content today at YouTube, which is every day here. We'll get to Joe Harris, but we have to start with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. So we talked a little bit earlier in the show when we kicked this off about your approach today and where you're ranking these guys. But Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, I'll let you go over the rates without Harden on the floor this year, because that's really what we're here for.
Yeah. So in the games that Irving played without Harden and with Durant, he played 19 games, 1.31 DraftKings points per minute, 28.8% usage rate, 27.6% assist percentage. In the games that he played with both of Harden and Durant, including the regular season and the postseason, 14 games with both of those guys, 26.1% usage percentage. So only, lost a couple of points there. But where you saw the really big difference was his assist percentage dropped from 27.6% to 16.2%. He went from averaging 1.31 DraftKings points per minute to 1.09. And that's basically what you saw during the regular season as well. If you just isolate those numbers and look at what Irving has done so far in the postseason in those games, the assists just haven't been there. And that's something that we really saw start to be the case not too long after Harden and after everyone got healthy. You saw they basically came out and said, okay, Harden's the point guard, Kyrie's playing off ball, and you just saw Harden's assist numbers skyrocket and Irving's pretty much disappear. Now you take Harden out, it's an assist bump for both Durant and for Irving, but it makes sense. Irving's just going to have the ball in his hands a lot more. You already know he's going to play big minutes. His salary is still relatively inexpensive, especially at 9,200 on DraftKings. But that bump in assist percentage, in addition to the increase in usage, makes a really big deal. It
really does. And I think the one big question here too is, what are we doing when it comes to, let's say, Harden and Giannis in the same, Durant and Giannis in the same lineup, or Irving and Giannis, I suppose, wouldn't be as difficult, but Giannis is 11,000 on DraftKings. We could talk probably a little bit more about Fanduel too, since not only do people play there, but as you pointed out earlier, some of that pricing is also a little bit more difficult to get to, right? So is it doable to get two of these top price guys, say Durant and Giannis, in the same lineup together? And I don't mean, is it physically, is it actually possible to stay under the cap, but can you make decent lineups with them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier on DraftKings for sure. Especially if we're including Kyrie in that, because at 9,200, I would expect Irving to be one of the highest owned guys on DraftKings, or, we already talked about the ownership there. On FanDuel, it's a little bit different because, you have Chris Paul, you have Drew Holiday, where you can save a little bit of money. You have Mike James, who obviously we'll talk about in depth in a minute. But all of those guys are at the point guard position. And then on top of that, you kind of have to think further down the lineup because of how shooting guard is laid out, where you have Devin Booker and then a bunch of guys who suck. You're going to be going to Devin Booker a lot, even though he's I think a lot of people would agree that if they were the same position, $9,700 for Kyrie Irving is probably more appealing than $8,700 for Devin Booker in these circumstances. But because you have such better options at point guard outside of Kyrie than you do at shooting guard outside of Booker, it kind of forces you towards Booker and paying down at point guard. So it just makes it more difficult to get to Irving. I expect that'll be reflected in his ownership as well. And then, again, you're talking probably getting to one of Giannis or Jokic, maybe in addition to Kyrie, but normally just kind of by themselves, I think, on FanDuel. Whereas DraftKings, again, just a lot easier to get more than one of those guys in a lineup.
Yeah, I think you're right. And when you're talking ownership here, which we discuss throughout every show, you'll hear the boom bust tool, the optimal lineup percentage, but we reference ownership all the time. It's super important, whether it's a single game showdown slate, a 2-game slate, a 10-game slate. It's something you have to be looking at every day. If you're not a premium subscriber at Awesemo, that's cool, because today it's totally free for baseball and for basketball. Main slate ownership is entirely free. I would say follow along with us too. When we're looking at some of these ownerships, you know where we're going. For those of you that are already subscribers, you know what we're talking about here. You've been with us for a while. Maybe you're new, but you're utilizing the ownership, the top stack tool, the player prop tool. That's free actually, but lineup builder and all of that stuff, the Fantasy Cruncher add-on. And we always put free stuff out there that's usually behind paywall to give you a look of what we're doing. Today, The ownership projections, main slate for baseball and basketball are free. And if you want to check everything else out, go to awesemo.com/join. We got you covered for monthly, weekly, annual, doesn't matter. One sport, all sport, and all the tools built by Alex Baker. Awesemo, #1 ranked DFS player out there, used by him, not just built by him, used by him to win millions of dollars playing DFS. And if you've seen the Hall of Fame page, if you've seen the top of the leaderboards, there's a lot of Awesemo avatars up there for sure. So check out the free ownership projections today. Don't miss out on that. All right. Do you want to talk about Joe Harris here, or do you want to get a little bit deeper in the Durant and Irving?
We'll talk a little bit more about Durant and Irving because we didn't touch too much on Durant. He's, I think clearly the top projected guy from Brooklyn. He's also a little bit more expensive. He's averaged so far through the postseason 1.42 DraftKings points per minute. He's averaged about 38 minutes per game, and you can see that go up in competitive games as well. But during the regular season, in the games that he played with Irving, without Harden, he had he averaged 1.48 DraftKings points per minute. He had about a 31% usage rate, which is similar, actually a little bit lower than he's had in the postseason so far. But again, you just see an uptick in his assist percentage, which makes sense because you're taking Harden off the floor, and you're also going to have some minutes where Durant's out there without Irving and has the ball in his hands a lot. So I think Durant looks great. Again, it kind of just comes down to if the $700 or whatever it is doesn't matter too much, like for the rest of your lineup. I still prefer Giannis to Durant just in terms of raw points, but I'm not really going too far out of my way to find the way to get to Giannis over Durant because Durant is just incredibly good still and going to get more opportunities here. You mentioned, an efficient shooter. He gets more assists. He rebounds well. So everything, looks really good for him too. Just a little bit more difficult to get to at his price point than Irving is, I think, especially on DraftKings.
What about Joe Harris here? We'll get to the no Harden thing and who gets the minutes in place of him or in his stead. But is there any interest when we talk about Joe Harris as somebody that is not great for DFS, but should see slightly added usage today? It's tough at that. Like you talk about price points being cheap on DraftKings. Joe Harris to me is, even without Harden, is not cheap today.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a really kind of awkward price point on Harris, I think, especially on DraftKings, because he's $6,000. And I think if you look at 6K Harris, you kind of say, like, okay, I understand how he can be a good play there. Like he can, knock down a bunch of threes, get 35 fantasy points. You're really happy if you have him. But it just even intuitively, even if you're not looking at projections and everything else, which also back this up, it just is more likely that he disappoints at 6K than that he has a really big game, especially when you consider how pricing looks everywhere else on the slate. You can save $3,000 and play Bruce Brown or PJ Tucker or whoever. Not that those are great options, but they're going to open up stuff elsewhere in your lineup. Whereas Joe Harris isn't really saving you money. Like he's 6K is above the average cost of a roster spot on DraftKings, and he's unlikely to be someone that really wins you the slate. So it kind of just pushes him out into large field tournament consideration for me. You could probably make a little bit better case for him on Fanduel because pricing is tighter there, and he's actually less expensive on Fanduel than he is on DraftKings. The problem you run into is that you don't get the 3-point bonus on Fanduel, and he's a small forward where there actually are a couple of reasonably priced options with Chris Middleton only at 7,700, with Michael Porter at 7,800, and then of course Durant, one of the top pay-up options on the slate. So I think Harris actually is one of the few guys on this slate that looks better on FanDuel than he does on DraftKings, but I think it's gonna be pretty tough to prioritize him on either site.
Blake Griffin's playing time in the first series, he averaged around 21, 22 minutes a game. And then, I think it was 21 minutes a game. And then he came out, played 35 minutes here against the Milwaukee Bucks in a win where not only did he play 35 minutes, but he played extraordinarily well. He rebounded well. He shot well. He did a lot. Now, the crazy thing to me, at least, is that Blake Griffin actually lost about a minute and a half in a blowout when Nash emptied the bench. So you're talking about someone that was getting half of the minutes, essentially, that he got in game one of this series. He would have played around 37 minutes if they finished that game out and didn't empty the bench. That's insane. And he's still 4,100 on DraftKings. Yeah,
pretty crazy playing time. And then also the thing that stands out, and I was pretty surprised by it, his per minute production since joining the Nets is so drastically different with James Harden on and off the floor. And even if you break it down a little bit further, so he's played 168 minutes with James Harden on the floor. He's only averaged 0.66 DraftKings points per minute. He's played 528 minutes without Harden. He's averaged 1.08 DraftKings points per minute. So a huge gap there. Obviously, you can say, yeah, okay, but Durant and Irving weren't out there for all those minutes either. Even if you just look at minutes where both of Kyrie,
I was going to ask you that. Yeah.
With Irving and Durant both on the floor and Harden off, 184 minutes, still 0.94 DraftKings points per minute for Griffin. So, very solid production, especially if you're expecting this uptick in playing time to hold. And when you consider that he's still cheap, he's only 5,100 on Fanduel, which is relatively inexpensive given the cost of everyone else. But 4,100 on DraftKings with power forward and center eligibility. I think there's a lot of builds that you can get to where you use him at center, which normally isn't something that you really love to do, but it's a little bit different in the postseason where you don't have 6 mid-range centers and you're saying, okay, 2 of these guys are probably going to score 50, so I don't really want to pay down the 4,100 for Blake Griffin. You don't have that here. Like, you have Jokic at the top, you have Ayton in the middle, you have Lopez for like $700 more than Griffin. But going to him at center is, I think, perfectly fine. Going to him at power forward is perfectly fine. I think he grades out as one of the best values tonight.
Yeah, it's weird. Hold on a second. Yeah, so it's funny because I guess he fouled out at the same time that the benches were emptied at the end of the game.
Oh, so he was. Yeah, he did actually. And the only reason I remember that is I pulled up, I was trying to see what the foul situation was, and it said he had 7. And I was like, that seems like cheating, but
it's definitely worse than 6. But if he's still playing, that's great. Yeah, I don't know, but I'm with the ownership is the only thing that comes into play here, right? Is 63% projected ownership on DraftKings at $4,100. That's a lot. He's $5,100 on FanDuel, still getting 33% ownership. Is this one of these areas, though, where we say, all right, he's super, super popular today, but rightfully so, and he's so cheap on a 2-game slate that if he gets anywhere close to those minutes, you're going to be real sorry that you faded Blake because he was because he was high on.
I think so. And you can add on to that. I mean, if you are looking to fade him, especially with it being a 2-game slate, the opportunity cost of everything is just lower than it would be on like a 10-game slate. So like on a 10-game slate, if you're getting a ton of ownership on Blake Griffin, you just say, okay, I'll pick some other $4,100 guy. You don't really have those, but you can very easily here say, okay, if Blake Griffin plays less minutes than 63% of the field thinks he's going to play, who is most likely picking those minutes up? And I think the first answer is Nikola Claxton, who played every minute that Griffin wasn't on the floor last game and his minimum salary. I think Griffin plays a lot of minutes again tonight, but if he doesn't, you're probably seeing more minutes from Claxton. Sure, you could see some smaller lineups too with like Durant at the 5 and with, Bruce Brown out there or Shamet out there, whatever. But I think the first option, like if Blake were to get in foul trouble or just play really poorly or something, I think the first guy they're going to replace him is probably Nikola Claxton, which means that, if you are getting away from what pretty much across the board, I don't think it really matters what site you look at, Blake Griffin's going to project as one of the best values. If you're getting away from that, just go all in with it and play Claxton.
Yeah, and this is a different matchup than we had against Boston, so it's tough to look at who was getting all of those minutes when Blake was off the floor in that series. But, it wasn't always Claxton getting all the backup run behind Blake Griffin when he was playing those 20 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. But you also you have to keep in mind too that with Harden being out, even though they're different positions, a lot of these wings / guards are taking Harden minutes now.
The trickle down effect. Yeah.
Right.
It's a good point. Would you be 100% opposed to playing Claxton and Blake in the same lineup?
No. If it's a 2-game
like a
slate,
30-18 situation isn't out of the question.
Right. Yeah, it's not at all. And the bigger thing, again, is I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's optimal. But if you're playing 150 lineups in a top heavy tournament, where on a 2-game slate, it's something I know Josh has talked about a lot, on shows that we've done together, especially talking football. You kind of, as the slate gets smaller, the rules that logically make sense, don't play Blake and Claxton together, ignoring those rules kind of has a net neutral effect because you're making a slightly worse lineup, but you're also making a lineup that a lot of people have rules set to not make. So you're just naturally being contrarian by doing that. So I don't worry quite as much about rules like that on a 2-game slate. It's not something that's going to show up in like, my single entry my $100 single entry tournament lineup, I don't think. But, if I'm running 150 lineups, I'm probably not setting a rule against it. I would keep an eye out just to make sure that I don't end up with, some crazy amount of lineups having that pairing.
Yeah. They're like forcing in Durant and Giannis
right. Yeah. Like I don't want to open Fantasy Cruncher after the slate starts and go, oh, I have 60% Claxton and 50% of it's with Blake. That's not good.
Brutal. And if you're curious why, because if Blake does play 37 minutes, then
Claxton's playing like 12.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And one thing you can do in Fantasy Cruncher also is this is a situation where I do think you can use that boost feature where it just says, if Blake Griffin is not in this lineup, bump Nicholas Claxton's projection by 10%, because the most likely scenario, if Blake Griffin fails for one reason or another, is that Nicholas Claxton at least plays more minutes than we're projecting. And from that point, you're just kind of hoping that the production comes with it.
All right. Let's talk about Harden's absence and who should get these minutes today. Man, Mike James, 60%. I remember last time Mike James was 60%, and it was kind of like a can't miss spot, and it missed in a massive way. Now, I know you remember that, and I'm not saying it was the wrong play by any means, but I have some reservations about whether or not this is just a hot hand thing. And Mike James being 60% to me, even at his price point, I feel a lot less comfortable to 60% James than 60% Blake Griffin. That's just me, though.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll point out, this is another one where I think the pricing between sites is massive, because 3,300 on DraftKings, even if Mike James plays like 16 minutes, he'll probably like 5x and it's whatever. On FanDuel, he's 4,800, which means that you actually need him to play like mid-20s in minutes most likely, but he's still going to be popular because it's so hard to come by value on FanDuel that if you just like click optimize, you're getting a bunch of Mike James lineups based on his median projection. There's a lot of volatility in this guy's projection tonight. So I think it's a spot where, again, on DraftKings, I'm more inclined to just say, whatever, screw it. He's 3,300. But, on the flip side, there's also just a lot of underpriced guys on DraftKings. So you can still get away from him if you want to. But on FanDuel, like if you just find a way to play like a Chris Paul plus Drew Holiday lineup and take a chance on some cheap guy somewhere else, there's a, like if this game played 1,000 times, there's a decent number of times where Mike James plays 16 minutes, scores 13 FanDuel points at 4,800, and you're just in a great position if you don't have him. So again, it's not saying I don't like Mike James. I think he's a good play. I understand why he's being played, but I think there's a very wide range on his playing time here, because you look last game, he played 30.2 minutes, which is great. He wasn't even in the rotation against Boston. Tyler Johnson was ahead of him. And again, you don't want to take too much away from that. It's a different matchup and all of that. But the reason I mention it is Tyler Johnson played 0 minutes until garbage time. So even if you just say, okay, what if Tyler Johnson plays 10 minutes today, 5 minutes in each half? So now you're down to 20 minutes on Mike James, most likely, instead of 30. The other thing, Bruce Brown subbed in for James Harden, and then Bruce Brown started the second half. Bruce Brown played 21.3 minutes. In the 6 games he started during the regular season without Harden and with Durant and Irving, Brown averaged 27.2 minutes. So if Brown plays 6 more minutes, are those coming off of Mike James? Because, then you're down to 24, or if Johnson's in the rotation, now you're down
I think
to
they have to.
Right.
Not all of them,
and so it's in 8 regular season games without Harden, with Durant, with Irving, Mike James averaged 15 minutes per game. So again, if he plays well, we just saw him play 30 minutes. He can definitely do it again. But I think there's definitely going to be I'm trying to word it the right way, because like on the one hand, I do think he's one of the best values based on median projection, just going by what we saw last game. But the floor, I think, is a lot lower than a lot of people are going to give it credit for, because it's not like we're not in game 6 of the series where Mike James has been a key part of the rotation for the first 5 games. We're in game 2 where James Harden got hurt 40 seconds into the game, and they threw in, Mike James for 30 minutes. We have really no idea what it's going to look like now that they've, game planned for James Harden to not be there.
Yeah, for sure. They played 8 minutes alongside each other last game, which is better than 0, at least, right? Like it's better than 0 if Bruce Brown starts getting more run. But the natural question here would be, with Mike James getting those minutes last game and the ownership he's getting now, Bruce Brown is getting half of the projected ownership of Mike James on DraftKings. He's only $500 more expensive. On FanDuel, he's $5,900. That's significantly more. He's $1,100 more expensive. virtually the same ownership, actually 4% more than Mike James at shooting guard, which is just a dreadful position, which has a lot to do with it. But on DraftKings, he's $500 more, and he's getting a half of the ownership.
Yeah, that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And again, a half is still, we're talking 30%. So he's getting good ownership here.
Sure.
But there's two things, and this is assuming that he starts. But like I had said before, he averaged 27 minutes per game in the 6 games he started in this situation. He averaged a fantasy point per minute. He rebounds well for anybody, but for a guard, this is someone that generally does produce relatively well when he gets his minutes. It's like, it's just, I think, and the NBA postseason has been very profitable for me because it just seems like people overreact to what happened the game before. And, again, it's not to say that James can't play 30 and Brown can't play 21, but I think a much more realistic projection is like 27, 28 minutes for Brown and 20 minutes for James or something like that. And if you go with that projection, you're even 22 minutes for James. If you go with that projection, you're not going to get 2x the ownership on Mike James.
Anything else for Brooklyn?
I think we talked about everybody. If obviously Tyler Johnson's like a leverage play to Mike James, but you need to really be fine with going broke if you're going that route.
All right. If you jumped in late, welcome to the show. If you're coming in after the tip-off or you're sticking around for Live Before Lock, what's up? Hit that thumbs up. We did get over 300, so appreciate all of you. And on our way to 400 as we close this show out. Not now, of course. We still have 17 minutes in a full game to go, but we'll get there. I have faith in you. Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets escaped that round 1 series against the Blazers and Damian Lillard. Now they take on the Phoenix Suns. This game opened with the Nuggets getting 4.5 points. They're getting 5.5 now, 221.5 total. I'm looking at this spot and seeing Nikola Jokic once again in a position where he's just going to have to do pretty much everything. I've been hitting the under on his assist prop just every time over his last 4 games. And one of the reasons for that was pretty obvious. He had to do everything offensively. Now, of course, the over hit in that double overtime game, but that's just the way it goes. I don't see once again how Nikola Jokic isn't forced to at least attempt to do everything for this. Not everything, right? Monte Morris has played well. Michael Porter Jr. had a really great first quarter last series. And, there's a few guys that step up, but I'm taking the over on Jokic points again today. I'm taking the over on Giannis points. If I hadn't mentioned that, go over to OddsShopper, check him out, shop around. There's some better lines on certain books than there are on others. You can see all of the odds from everywhere. You can set your watch list, get notifications, set a bet tracker. And of course, my favorite part, type a name and get all of their props that show up. Take advantage of some of those opportunities for these books that are really trying to get people over to their sites as sports betting expands like crazy. Oddshopper.com, totally free, part of Awesemo, and we're proud of it. So I'm not saying Jokic is the best play on the slate because you have Durant without Harden. You have Giannis against an inferior interior defense for Brooklyn. But how does he not have to do everything again?
Yeah, and I think the point you're making there about the prop bets too is really important because there's a lot of overlap, of course, between like guys we're going to like in DFS and guys that you're going to like the overs in the prop market. But with Jokic, we've actually seen just like a split where in the games during the regular season that he played without Jamal Murray, he had about a 32% usage rate. He had like a 43% assist percentage. In the postseason, his usage rate is up over 36% now, but his assist percentage is at only 25%, which makes sense for the reasons you're saying. He needs to score more. He needs to do more offensively. And you're getting more minutes from Monte Morris along with Campazzo, who are both guys that are good passers and playmakers and going to pick up assists. So you're seeing the way Jokic gets his stats change, and that's something you can take advantage of, looking at props, I think. So that's really important to pay attention to, and something that, Jokic, we've clearly seen that. From a DFS standpoint, it doesn't make a huge difference. He's averaged 1.6 DraftKings points per minute in the postseason. He averaged 1.73 DraftKings points per minute in the games without Jamal Murray during the regular season. So you're seeing similar production, a slight drop off in the postseason, which, is kind of to be expected in terms of efficiency. But averaging between 35, 36 minutes per game. Reasonably tough matchup here. I mean, Phoenix is a solid team defensively. We have seen Deandre Ayton play well, but Jokic in 3 meetings with Ayton in the regular season averaged that same 1.6 DraftKings points per minute that he has so far in the postseason, averaged about 25 points per game, 13 rebounds, 8 assists in that ballpark. So Still really like Jokic. The biggest issue, I think, in getting him into lineups, and I think it is reflected in the ownership projections, he's behind Irving, Durant, Giannis slightly on DraftKings, is not only, again, do you have Ayton, do you have Brook Lopez, but Blake Griffin on DraftKings being a center, I know I mentioned it before, but it's going to make it a lot more difficult, I think, to prioritize Jokic when you can throw Griffin into that spot and then, use your remaining salary on those guard and forward spots that are a little bit more difficult to fill. So, I think that from like an optimal lineup standpoint, it's a little bit more difficult to get there. But again, in terms of just projection, I think he's the second highest projected guy on the slate behind Giannis. And there's certainly nothing whatsoever wrong with rostering him if you're able to make a lineup around him that you like.
The remainder of Denver gets a little interesting when you look at Michael Porter Jr. We can start there, and then we'll work our way to Facundo Campazzo and Monty Morris getting those guard minutes. But Porter Jr., the one game was absurd. Just truly absurd in the first quarter. And Jokic had 0 points. And then the game ended with Porter having 26 after a 22-point first quarter and Jokic having like 38. So, we know where the muscle is on this team. But Porter has now had back-to-back good games. So one of them being double overtime. You still have to hand it to him. He's rebounded nicely from an awful start to the series.
Yeah, for sure. And, that he's one of these guys that I know you and I had talked about where the opportunities had still been there for him. It was just he wasn't shooting well at the beginning of that series. He averaged during the regular season in the games without Murray, he averaged 1.12 DraftKings points per minute. He's at 0.94 now in the postseason. But again, he just got off to that dreadful start. You've seen him go back to scoring at a rate that you're more used to in those last couple of games. So I still think he's underpriced here, 7,100 on DraftKings, 7,800 on Fanduel. There's definitely risk at that salary because again, he is fully capable of disappearing. And the other thing too, is that the minutes, even though he's averaging between 34 and 35 minutes per game, it can be difficult for him to get those like 40 minutes that you're getting from a lot of guys in the postseason. Like, for example, if you go back to the closeout game against Portland and you look at the closing lineup there, you had JaMychal Green play the entire fourth quarter. And then Aaron Gordon subbed in for Porter instead of for Green because Denver was up in that game. And there was just no way that Michael Malone was putting Michael Porter Jr. back on the floor with like an 8-point lead in the fourth quarter or late in the fourth quarter. So you run into, again, I still don't think Malone entirely trusts him defensively. That's something that we saw, going back to the bubble and just for his entire career, basically, he's always been at risk of getting benched for that reason. So there is still risk there. But, again, when you're talking like 7,100 on DraftKings, 7,800 on FanDuel, there's not that many options that give you the type of ceiling that Porter does. Holiday, Middleton, that's, I think, more or less it in that price range.
Well, I think Monty Morris is it's not really an I think. He's just been great. The past couple of games since he's really gotten some extended run. We were fortuitous in that Campazzo got in a ton of foul trouble early in the second half of game 6, right? Like he had 3 fouls in the start of the second half to make it 4. But then Malone put him back in and then he caught a 5. He caught his 5th at the end of the third quarter. We had the over here on the deeper dive and 4.5 assists. He had 5 with like 5 minutes to go in the first half. So we'll take that all day long. Also had the under on Jokic assists at 6.5, finished with 6. There is a bit of a correlation there. Monty Morris, when he's out there, has done a decent amount of ball handling and has been pretty proficient in that sense. He has 14 assists over his last 2 games. He's also shot not even like lights out. He's just shooting a lot at him and he's getting up a lot of 3-point attempts. I still don't think his price point's all that crazy. But the only issue I have is Malone going to consistently give him this type of playing time, assuming we get something close to what we've seen before?
So my guess as far as the playing time goes, like if you take foul trouble out of it, I think the most likely closing lineup is Campazzo alongside Morris. Like both of these guys are better than Austin Rivers.
For sure.
And, and last game, even if you look at the rotation where Campazzo did have that foul trouble, he picked
back
up his
and Morris was still out there.
Right, yeah. Like he picked up his 3 fouls to start the third and Morris subbed in. But then when Campazzo came back, it was for Austin Rivers. And then Rivers came back in for him, played the entire final 14 minutes of the game after he picked up that 5th foul. So I do think that we've seen Rivers' playing time fluctuate a lot, and he's been a beneficiary there. I think that it's a hot hand situation, but just based on talent level, I think more often than not, the hot hands are going to be Campazzo and Morris as opposed to Rivers. Morris just seems pretty safe to me. Maybe you're not going to get 33 minutes again, but to get 28 to 30 minutes from Morris, who, is just a pretty solid player off the bench and someone that I think can be in that closing lineup. At 5,400 on DraftKings, I think he's still reasonable. 6,700 on FanDuel starts to get pretty tough. But again, everybody or most players are priced up on FanDuel, so it's all relative. But I do think that 5,400 on DraftKings is still a pretty decent value because I think you're still getting, at least 28 to 30 minutes from Morris.
And the crazy thing is, like, Malone clearly wanted to get Campazzo back into the game. Usually when you pick up your fourth foul, you sit for a little more than, especially when it's only 4 minutes into the half. Usually you sit for more than 4 minutes. He was back in 4 minutes later. He just picked up his fifth after a minute.
They went on a 9-0 run in the 2 minutes he was in. That's pretty impressive.
Did they really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't score a point, but they went on a 9-0 run.
That was the start of the end for the Blazers.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what happens when Austin Rivers leaves the floor.
Oh, man. That Austin Rivers game. That was a sight to behold. Let me tell you, he played 40 minutes and had 7.75 fantasy points. It's really difficult to do.
It is.
That's what, 0.19 fantasy points per minute. Do you think if you were out there for 40 minutes, do you think in one game, you only have one game, could you outscore Austin Rivers?
Not a chance in hell.
No?
Especially now. I mean, like, when I don't know, when I was like 17 and like could probably shoot like 30% from three or something, like maybe like wide open threes, but like, no, definitely not.
You don't think you could have racked up a couple chase down blocks on Nurkic or something?
I mean, I probably would have dunked on him once or twice too. But
yeah. I like if you gave me a year to train for it, I would say absolutely.
It all comes down
because
to,
I would just shoot 1,000 threes a day.
Right. Yeah. So it just comes down to what percentage can you shoot on wide open threes? Because
That's it. That's all it comes down to.
And there also has to be some caveat where your teammates have to pass you the ball.
Yes, of course. Well, you have to wonder, like, all right, you come out there and warm-ups and just draining them. Like, maybe we'll get him a couple opportunities, I don't know.
I don't think Michael Porter Jr. is ever watching me in warm-ups and saying, yeah, I'm giving that dude the ball.
Give me 6 looks. All I need to do on DraftKings is knock down 3 of them. Shoot 50% from 3 in a game. It's doable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still think the better argument is not like, can you shoot 50% in a 1-game sample from 3? It's, can you get these guys to give you the ball 6 times in 48 minutes?
Yeah, it's a great point. I don't know, dude. I'll just grab the offensive boards. Could you imagine? What else are we doing with the Nuggets? We'll close it out with the Suns.
Yeah, so I mean, staying on the topic of Austin Rivers, I guess the guy's 4K on DraftKings, and he's a $4,800 shooting guard. Again, just a dead position, or 4,900, sorry, on FanDuel. So I'm not going to say I feel good about him. He's one of these guys that we talk about where you kind of have to get lucky twice. He's averaged 0.6 fantasy points per minute in the postseason, 0.7 since joining the Nuggets in the regular season. So you need him to actually produce at like a higher rate than that. But then you also need him to play a lot of minutes, which he certainly can. He played 40 in that last game. He averaged 33 minutes per game in that series overall. But we saw games where he played 20 minutes, 24 minutes. And it just goes back to, what happens if Campazzo's not in foul trouble and Morris is playing reasonably well. Those guys can easily cut into Rivers playing time. So he is risky. You kind of just have to get lucky twice, but 4K is fine on DraftKings. Shooting guard on FanDuel, if you're breathing, you're an option at this point. So still, it's Austin Rivers, but he's in play. The other thing I think to point out from the Nuggets would be Aaron Gordon, who played 33 minutes in that closeout game, which was good to see. His playing time kind of fluctuated from like 28 minutes to 33 minutes throughout that series. Overall, he averaged about 30 minutes per game. His fantasy production hasn't been great with Denver, but one thing that I did think was good to see is that he didn't drop off in the postseason. A lot of times you'll see role players kind of lose production in the postseason as, Jokic is taking more shots, for example. But Gordon averaged 0.83 DraftKings points after joining the Nuggets. He's at 0.86 in that last series. So I think you're getting around 30 minutes from Gordon. I think you're getting, around 0.85 fantasy points per minute. He's just it's more of a last piece in, but he's at a very reasonable price.
Josh of Los Angeles super chatted us $2 just to say neither of you are beating Rivers. No one thinks we're going to beat him. Which just the question was, could you get more than 7.75 fantasy points in a game? I mean, I told Ben yesterday that if you gave me 4 years to train, I could make an Olympic sport team. Yeah, I could make a team for
one, it was 2 years, and 4 years is still absurd.
Was it 2?
Yeah, it was 2.
Every day I train though. I don't have to work. All I can do is train.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, dude. It's straight lower body workouts. I'm the middle guy in a bobsled race.
This is another conversation where, like, if we were still 18, maybe at some like obscure
I'm in the best shape of my life. I do DFS analysis for a living. All right, we got to close this out with Phoenix. That's a fun conversation, though. We'll have to have that at some point when we have a showdown slate. Devin Booker, what are we doing with Devin Booker today? Coming off a monster performance and always has that electric upside. Like, that's the one thing about Booker is he's pretty volatile. The range of outcomes are pretty wide on Booker, but he does have that huge big game upside where he could rain down 50 real points. Yeah, and it wouldn't be surprising if he played the most minutes on the slate tonight either. Averaged 40 and a half in that minutes per game in that game against the series against the Lakers, rather. You have a team with Denver where, like, we've kind of had concerns about Jokic's playing time from a playoff standpoint. He's not playing 40, he's playing 36. Same can be said for, Budenholzer again, kind of has a track record of that. So it wouldn't be too shocking if Booker plays 42 minutes and leads the slate. 1.12 DraftKings points per minute in that Lakers series, basically in line with what he did during the regular season as well. Not as difficult a matchup here against Denver either, I don't think, as you had against the Lakers. So I think Booker looks really good. And again, we've alluded to it, especially on FanDuel. Like, it's not that Booker at 8,700 is necessarily better than some of these other relatively expensive guys. It's that the gap between Devin Booker, especially on the site where you have to roster 2 shooting guards, like if you're not rostering Devin Booker, you're basically saying, okay, I'm going to pay 4,900 for Austin Rivers, I'm going to pay 5,900 for Bruce Brown, and I'm going to roster, whatever at other positions. It's going to be kind of tough to beat the Devin Booker teams like that, especially when you consider that almost every team that doesn't have Devin Booker is going to have that. That pairing, or at least one of those guys. So there's still going to be a bunch of overlap while you're still kind of making suboptimal lineups. So Booker, especially on FanDuel, I think is very, very valuable. He's a good play on DraftKings too. The problem you run into, though, is that you can play Holiday at shooting guard. You can play Kyrie at shooting guard. You can play a lot of people at shooting guard. Ray Duncan, smash that like button. He super chatted us to say that. What a guy. Appreciate you, Ray. Yeah, we're 33 from 400 before we pass the torch over to the Live Before Lock show. Coming up right after us is Josh Engleman, Greg Ehrenberg, taking you up to lock. Josh mentioned today on the strategy show too, that not to say that this is your take, that Phoenix, I think, was his second least favorite team behind Denver. If you're rounding out the rest of the Suns, aside from Booker, is there anyone you really like tonight? Chris Paul. Okay. And again, like there's the obvious risk because he's playing through that injury last series, but they've had 3 or 4 days off now. He seemed to aggravate it in the first quarter, I believe it was, of the last game, but then he played almost the entire fourth. He played well. In the postseason, he's averaged 0.94 DraftKings points per minute, which obviously takes into account the injury. He's only 7,300 on FanDuel, 6,500 on DraftKings. If you're going to get around 30 minutes from him, or even more, assuming that he's feeling better now, hopefully, I think that he's just underpriced given the range of outcomes and the uncertainty. Like, he could just come out and be perfectly fine, in which case the guy averaged 1.25 fantasy points per minute this season. So I think there's a massive ceiling for Paul. There's obviously still some health related risk. And then I think you get to Ayton, Crowder, Bridges to round out this team. Deandre Ayton averaged 37 minutes per game in the games that he played against Jokic during the regular season. He played at least 37 minutes in 4 of the 6 games of that Lakers series. 1.09 DraftKings points per minute in the regular season, 0.91 against the Lakers. I think, he'll have his hands full defensively with Jokic, but from a fantasy standpoint, a little bit better matchup here with Denver than you had with the Lakers. So I still like the price tag on Ayton. Jay Crowder, you kind of know what you're getting. He averaged 31.5 minutes per game last series. In games where he's not in foul trouble, you can get a couple more minutes. Averages around 0.8 fantasy points per minute, as does Bridges, who also, plays 33, 34 minutes per game. So Bridges, 4,800 on DraftKings, I think is a lot better price than 6,100 on FanDuel. But, him and Crowder are both sort of in that like Aaron Gordon mold of just rounding out your lineups. For anyone that showed up late, this is how we'll wrap the show up, how we usually do it. Top option at the top of the player pool. So one of Jokic, Giannis, and Durant, and your favorite value option. It can't be Blake Griffin or Mike James on draft? I know that's tough, but give me someone different since those are very obvious.
Okay, well, I'm adding Kyrie Irving at 9,200 to the pay ups.
Sure, go ahead.
And taking Kyrie just because of the salary.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, like he's $1,000 less. The other guys, it's kind of in the order of the salary. Like, what can I fit? If I can fit Giannis, it's Giannis. If I can fit Jokic, it's Jokic. If I can fit Durant, it's Durant. But Irving, I think, just really stands out there. So I can't take Blake Griffin. Bruce Brown.
Yeah, it's the pretty obvious pivot off of that ownership too, right? So
yeah, or even with him is fine. But yeah, Bruce Brown, assuming he starts.
What did you say? What was the thing you said before that?
Oh, even with Griffin is fine.
Would you play Brown and James together in any spots?
Yeah, I think that's fine too. Because like you said, they did play most of their minutes together last game.
8.
Yeah, like I think the bigger threats to James are either Shamet plays more, Tyler Johnson gets in the rotation. The rotation just changes entirely. Like if Brown plays more minutes than he did last game, it certainly can have a negative impact on James. Like if you look at the closing lineup, I think that a lot of times you're getting Brown instead of James in that lineup. But again, that was only like 5 or 6 minutes. So given that Mike James is 3,300 and Brown is 3,800, I don't mind playing them together. All
right. Hey, appreciate you guys for hanging out. As always, we'll see you back here tomorrow. Thanks for watching. It's been the Deeper Dive presented by Monkey Knife Fight. Remember, $100 deposit bonus. You use the promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO. Josh, Greg, coming up next. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Finally, after 2 full hours, the main event is here. The prelims are over, and we're on to the real stuff. It is NBA Live Before Lock. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Greg Ehrenberg. We are brought to you by Monkey Knife Fight. And we've got 2 games to talk about, and I'm kind of excited for this slate, other than the fact that Nets value chalk is going to drive Twitter crazy. Greg, are you excited for Nets value chalk? There goes my camera.
Yes, there goes your camera. Yes and no, because first of all, I do kind of think there's good pivots here, relative to what the ownership is on the slate. The other thing, too, is, it's much better than the usual situation we have on 2-game slates where there's no good value plays, especially for a playoff series. So I'm kind of surprised that, because, we've known that Harden was going to be out today for a while. I don't really expect Harden to be back for a little while. I'm surprised these guys are going to get priced up by Draftkings or Fanduel.
So am I, actually, particularly Kyrie Irving. In fact, it's kind of crazy to me. And we're going to dig into that in a little bit. But before we do, 1,700 plus people in here. I know that number is going to rise into the 2,000s in a bit, so I'll shout those extra 300 people out in a little bit. 440 likes. Looks like they left some on the table previously, so we'll go ahead and scoop those up. Don't be afraid to hit that thumbs up. Clearing 500 will be no problem, but I'll make my push for 600 a little bit later. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. Let's start here. Let's start with the guards. Who is your favorite guard play for today?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways I could answer this. On a points per dollar basis, it's Mike James. He played 30 minutes last game, and I am basically expecting the same Nets rotation today that they played last game. So points per dollar, it's Mike James. Overall, it's Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving played 44 minutes last game. I didn't give him quite 44 minutes tonight, but I don't really see a good reason to think he wouldn't play 44 minutes again after he played 44 minutes last game, unless they just kind of dial back a little bit. But yeah, it's Kyrie Irving, Mike James, and then kind of everybody else.
How much concern do you have in Mike James today, given the fact that he's 60% owned?
Not as much as I should, I guess, because he played 30 minutes last game. The other thing also to consider about last game, he only had a 16% usage rate, and Mike James typically carries a much higher than 16% usage rate. And maybe they dial back the minutes a little bit, but considering his price on DraftKings is so cheap, it's kind of hard to see a situation where, unless they just drastically change the rotation, which, considering the Nets won last game, why would they change it up all that much? Mike James for the year, he averaged right around a fantasy point per minute. And even if we dial it way back and we say that he plays 24 minutes, he's still a terrific play.
I agree. I tried to be pretty pessimistic with his minutes projection. That still makes him my second best option of the day, just behind Blake Griffin, who we will definitely get to in a bit. And I agree with you on the Kyrie Irving take. He does not have a price tag that represents the fact that James Harden is not going to be on the floor. And it doesn't have a price tag that represents the fact that he's not going to be playing 32 minutes like it's a regular season game. He's going to play 40, maybe 42, maybe 44. Who the hell knows? But I expect him to play 40 at a minimum in a competitive game that he doesn't have to leave the floor for extra reasons. So I'm with you there. Are there any guards that you see picking up a lot of ownership that you don't agree with?
Let me look. I want to make sure I have the most recent ownership in front of me. If we have one updated, just refreshing that page right now. And by the way, ownership projections are free today. Last update came out 29 minutes ago. So starting with DraftKings, I think 34% for Jrue Holiday is a little bit high. He's somebody I have less than that, just considering that there's so many other point guard options that I think are so strong on the slate. I understand he's point guard and shooting guard eligibility, but I didn't find it all that problematic to get to more of Giannis than Jrue Holiday in my stacks of that game. So Jrue Holiday maybe a little bit highly owned at that number. Bruce Brown over 30% on DraftKings. That's a little high to me. He didn't play that much last game. And for sure, there is ceiling for him to play more today than he played in that last game. But even if he starts number one, he's going to be competing for usage with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. The other thing, too, he played 21 minutes last game. So it's not to say that he's a bad play on points per dollar basis, but I don't think that he warrants quite that much ownership, because if he plays 21 minutes again, and if he's going to be splitting usage with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant when he's on the court, I don't think that he has as much upside as some of the other cheap plays.
Got a super chat from Bryson Henry, said, what percentage of exposure should I have to Irving, Durant, James, and Brown if I have 20 lineups?
Well, this is a very specific question.
How should I build all of my 20 lineups if I am playing 20 lineups?
So let's see. What is the best way to answer this question? So for Kyrie Irving and Mike James, to me, those are the two priorities. Then Kevin Durant would be next, and then Bruce Brown last of those four. For me, if you're playing 20 lineups, I don't have an issue with playing Mike James in 19 or 20 of them. I think that's a fine stance to take and just go super heavy on Mike James. Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant. By the way, if you're playing all four of these guys in the same lineup, I think it inhibits you a little bit. So Kyrie Irving, I have a lean towards Kyrie over Kevin Durant. Today I have more exposure to Kyrie. Bruce Brown, I'm right now a little bit underweight to the field.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm 50 to 70% Irving, 50 to 70% Durant. I don't know, 50 to 100% James, 25 to 50% Bruce Brown, something in that neighborhood. I don't know.
How many minutes are you expecting Bruce Brown to play today?
That is a very good question. I have Bruce Brown in for 26 minutes.
Okay. I gave the Nets rotation almost the exact same minutes as last game. So with that in mind, I gave Bruce Brown 21 minutes, and that makes him look not especially terrific.
That would really surprise me.
It's what he played last game, and James Harden only played 30 seconds.
I think the more likely scenario is that Bruce Brown is in a closing lineup.
They closed with Mike James last game, though, also.
Sort of. I think Bruce Brown closes if it matters. That's my guess. I'd be surprised if Bruce Brown played 21 minutes today or less in that match. Yeah. Although, if that happens and it's because Tyler Johnson is also playing, all bets are off. Because they could get really weird with this too.
Yeah, they could give Tyler Johnson minutes. They could give Shamet a few extra minutes today. I agree. If you ask me, is he more likely to go above or below the minutes I gave him? The answer is definitely above. But I just kind of trended towards giving the Nets more or less the same lineups they got, the minutes they got last game.
The other key piece for me is that Bruce Brown does not appear to be picking up the same ownership as everyone else. And I don't want to project $3,800 Bruce Brown to a point where I can't get him in that same way. I would rather just get more and hope that it flips the opposite direction if Bruce Brown is going to be half as owned as Mike James.
Yeah, I that's not what I did, but I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. If you were going really contrarian with any of the other Nets guards, Landry Shamet, Tyler Johnson. I don't know Tyler Johnson, my player, but I do have Landry Shamet though. Do you have any of those guys that you like to get to?
I basically don't have Landry Shamet. He's in two of my lineups, but I am doubling the field on Bruce Brown. I'm just sort of cornering the market on the James, Blake Griffin, Bruce Brown trio. And I probably have every sort of combination of those guys. And I'm going to hope two of them out of the three are viable.
Gotcha.
Doug Burdick with the super chat said, the experts are in the house. Yeah, that's correct. Doug knows what's up. Does it make sense to play someone like Connaughton and DK Cash if I could fit 3 9K plus studs?
No,
I would not be playing Pat Connaughton in Cash. Not with, it's just not necessary with Mike James and Blake Griffin both existing. I would very easily go to Bruce Brown before I went to Pat Connaughton in that scenario as well. But there's enough value out there today where I don't think that is something you need to do.
Here are the cheap guys to play in cash: Blake Griffin, Bruce Brown, Mike James. Like, I'm not super high on Bruce Brown relative to his ownership in GPPs, but he's still high enough owned and he's still reasonable enough value. Play him in cash for sure.
And if you want to even like expand that further, 4K Austin Rivers probably a better option than Pat Connaughton. Not that I like it all that much, but just saying, yeah, not a direction I would want to go. Anything else at guard you want to touch on?
Let's see, guards. Yeah, Chris Paul. I've said this for a few games now. I think he's relatively healthy, and I don't think the box scores really bear that out, just because the last couple of games the Suns played against the Lakers were so one-sided that there was no need to push Chris Paul in those games. But Chris Paul, to me, especially if you go back to game 4, Chris Paul had nine assists, 0 turnovers. And I mean, you look at a stat like that and you have to figure his arm is, relatively healthy. And then just the two games to finish the series against the Lakers, 28 minutes and 23 minutes, they were so one-sided. Number one, Chris Paul, we've seen he kind of takes his foot off the gas pedal in games that are that one-sided, and the minutes just weren't there. But I don't have too many concerns about Chris Paul, and his price is, particularly on DraftKings, really far down. So Chris Paul is somebody who I like a whole bunch today. The field's also there with him, but I think for a good reason, he's somebody to prioritize.
The fact that he's 42% owned makes it hard for me to want to get a lot. So I'm basically just holding hands with the field right now on Paul.
Yeah.
I don't have a hot take or anything for it. I think he's properly owned, and that's where I'm going for Paul. 6,500 is just a really nice price.
Yeah. I'm a little over on Chris Paul.
Okay. Any other guards we want to touch on? I'm trying to filter my list down right now just to make sure I'm not missing anything that I want to touch on. We touched on James. Drew Holiday thoughts, 35.5% ownership on DK. Last I looked, 7,800. To me, going a little bit underrepresented today. I guess you could probably call him my second favorite guard in GPPs just because of a lack of ownership. Lack is maybe not the correct word at 35.5, but what are you doing with Drew Holiday?
Yeah, I mean, before you asked me if there's anybody I thought was going over owned, and I said Drew Holiday. So, I mean, to me, I'm a little lighter on him right now. I prefer.
I pulled a lot. I apologize. I just pulled a Laffy. I don't think that I do that all that frequently, so I'm a little mad at myself.
Yeah, I mean, it's where the numbers at. There's just so many other guards that I prefer on this slate. I prefer Chris Paul. I prefer Kyrie Irving. I prefer Mike James. I know those guys are all really popular also, but I mean, we're splitting hairs to a certain extent because Drew Holiday is projected for 34% ownership. Chris Paul is projecting for 41. All these guys are, somewhat popular for this slate. So Drew Holiday is still somebody I prefer to come under. And then especially if I'm going to be really heavy on Mike James, he's in almost all my lineups today. It's just easier for me to get up to Giannis.
Any thoughts at the guard position on FanDuel that differ from your DraftKings thoughts? We're getting a couple questions about FanDuel. I would say that Devin Booker, probably my favorite FanDuel guard option because there are no other shooting guards that are any good. If we just read off the shooting guards that aren't Devin Booker, that would be Austin Rivers, Bruce Brown, Bryn Forbes, Pat Connaughton, Torrey Craig, and Landry Shamet. Most of those things are not like the other. Devin Booker is just on a completely different wavelength, and I think that he is pretty clearly the best shooting guard option.
Yeah, and I looked at the shooting guard options on FanDuel, and I try to look for some kind of hot or contrarian take. There's not one to have. It's Devin Booker and everybody else sucks, and they're all projected for fairly similar ownership. We have Torrey Craig, Bryn Forbes, Pat Connaughton, Landry Shamet, Austin Rivers, Bruce Brown. All these guys are between 20 and 30% ownership basically, and I don't see a real significant difference between them. Other than just you play Devin Booker and it's whoever else fits in after the rest of your lineup is made. There's not one other guy I look at shooting guard and just be like, oh, that's the guy. It's just whoever fits with the rest of your salary.
You have already mentioned NBA main slate ownership projections are free today. So I'm going to double down on what you said. They are free today. Also, MLB ownership projections are free, which I assume MLB locks in 11 minutes. Just taking a guess. If it doesn't, no, actually, it probably locks in 16 minutes.
Nope. It locks. It is a 2-game slate that locks at 9:38 Eastern time.
Well, you got plenty of time to get in those MLB contests. Then both NBA and MLB are going to be free today in terms of ownership projections. And if you're looking to sign up at Awesemo.com, use the promo code NBA Live Before Lock. One gigantic word. Should switch that to NBA LBL. Neither here nor there. Giant promo code, but 15% off your first week of Awesemo plus Platinum. That would be my recommendation. Sign up for Awesemo.com and get access to everything we have. Ownership, always. Projections, always. The Boom Bust tool, which to me is the best thing that you can find on Awesemo.com for the NBA. And you'll know what we're talking about when we're on these shows. So again, NBA Live Before Lock. That is one giant word. Use that as your promo code when signing up and get 15% off your first week of Awesemo plus Platinum. Now we move on to the forwards. Someone had a question a little bit ago. I want to make sure that I scroll back to see if I can find it. Here it is. I'm the champ. Anybody playing Giannis?
Yeah, a lot of people, and I'm one of them.
Yeah, likewise. Talk to me about Giannis.
He's good. There's a lot of value on the slate. It's easy to get to him. He correlates very well with the stars on the net side of the game. Here's the only concern. This Mike Budenholzer character. I do not like this guy whatsoever. And I thought he had turned the page after the first round against the Miami Heat. There was a bunch of one-sided games in that series, but game one, Giannis plays 45 and a half minutes. And that game went to overtime, but he played over 40 minutes in regulation. And you think like, okay, Budenholzer last year, one of the biggest issues the Bucks had in the playoffs was he just wasn't willing to extend the minutes of his core players. And then you see that game one against Heat and you go, all right, the minutes are there. Then he only plays Giannis 35 minutes last game. And then the post game, he was like, I don't remember the exact quote, but basically he just justified it and said that, yeah, why do we need to play our guys more minutes? Like, because it's the playoffs and you're losing right now. But that's the only thing that gives me a little bit of hesitation is every other star is playing 40 plus minutes. Is Giannis really going to be capped at 36? You know, that really significantly handcuffs his upside compared to some of the other stars. I gave him 38 minutes today because I think it just makes sense. But there's definitely a concern for me that he plays 35, 36 minutes. And, you know, those 2-3 minutes could make a pretty significant difference because then you're starting to talk about, you know, somewhere like 3 less fantasy points on a projection for Giannis. So that's my only concern. But in general, I really like Giannis.
He is my most exposed pay up option right now. Love getting to Giannis. No issues with him. Gave him 38 minutes. Think there's upside for more. Happy to get there. He is my preferred option. What is your ratio right now of Giannis to Kevin Durant? Since that's really one of the few true comparison points on the slate of pay up options that basically play the same position.
Yeah, I have, let's see, I have about 2x Giannis to Kevin Durant. And one of the reasons also is because I prefer Kyrie Irving to Kevin Durant. And I didn't just want to have all my lineups that are, you know, just jammed Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, because then you kind of limit yourself on other pay up options. So to me, I prefer Kyrie Irving to Kevin Durant. And then I also prefer Giannis to Kevin Durant. So to me, the overall pay up option in terms of exposure I have to them, it's Kyrie 1, Giannis 2, Kevin Durant 3, and then Jokic 4.
We are on basically the same page, only it's Giannis at the top for me, then Kyrie, Durant, and Jokic. So that's where we stand for right now. What else are you looking to do at the forward spot? I guess we should talk about, I mean, I don't even think we need to talk all that long about it. To me, it is Blake Griffin is unquestionably the number one play on the slate, no matter which site you're playing on. I'm a little surprised that he's not actually pulling more ownership on FanDuel, but at 4,100 on DraftKings, that to me is the no-brainer of all no-brainers today.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a really strong value play. I also think that Claxton's a pretty good pivot play. Just in the case that is it out of the realm of possibility that Blake Griffin either gets in foul trouble or just Nick Claxton comes off the bench and plays out of his mind and they just ride with him. So to me, I think that Claxton is a pretty good pivot play, particularly on FanDuel, where at the center position, Claxton is picking up 11% ownership. I think that is a pretty strong GPP play. But in general, yeah, I agree. Griffin's a really strong play. Like I said, your camera turned off. But the other thing also is with Blake Griffin, he played so many minutes last game. And I think that he has to play an integral role in the offense without James Harden there. They gave him 35 minutes last game. And James Harden is the de facto point guard for them. And when he's off the court, they ran a lot of the offense through Blake Griffin last game, finished with 18 points, 14 rebounds. He hit 4 threes. I doubt he's going to repeat this kind of performance, but even if you dial back his minutes and give him 30, which is a big drop back from 35. And by the way, he also fouled out last game. So there's reason to think that he could potentially play more, but I didn't give him quite 35 minutes, but even giving him a few less minutes, he still comes out, looking really good.
I agree with everything you said. I am over the field on Nick Claxton right now, but if Blake Griffin happens to get in foul trouble, I do think we see DeAndre Jordan in this series. And I think that sort of limits the minutes upside of Nick Claxton. I don't think that Nick Claxton could just fall into a ton of minutes. I think that we would see DeAndre Jordan show up on the floor today. That said, Nick Claxton's 3,100 and I am over the field on him. So I'm not trying to dissuade anyone from going to Claxton. I do think DeAndre Jordan is in play if something goes wrong for Blake, just because of Jeff Green being out.
Did you play? I mean, to me, I can't do that. He hasn't played in a month. The last time DeAndre Jordan stepped on the court was May 8th. I remember last game for the Showdown contest when I was doing the show with Eric or maybe Spags? I don't remember what it was, but we had a bunch of questions in the chat where people like, DeAndre Jordan today? Is DeAndre Jordan going to start? Like, DeAndre Jordan hasn't played in a month. I don't understand why people were so excited to roster him for that slate. But I I have DeAndre Jordan projected to play 0 minutes today. I didn't get him in any lineups. Did you play him in one lineup as a contrarian option or anything?
Nope, I did not.
Okay.
Well, like my thought process on this is that he plays like 6 minutes if Blake Griffin or Nick Claxton is in foul trouble. That, like, to me, that's it. I just don't see, if something goes wrong, I don't see those guys 100% splitting 48 minutes. I think that they integrate DeAndre Jordan. I think it just kind of fits a little bit here. Anyway, not all that important. Anybody picking up a lot of ownership at the forward spot that you don't agree with?
Let's see. Forward position, individual ownerships. I think Mikal Bridges is maybe a little bit capped in terms of his upside at the elevated price. And once again, this is a slate where there's so much value. Josh, your camera turned off. There's so much value on this slate. It's pretty easy to go stars and scrubs. So a 4,800 Mikal Bridges, points per dollar, he's fine, but there's much better value plays than fine. We have Blake Griffin, we have Mike James. You want to go to some of the other cheaper Nets guys as a pivot, like, Nick Claxton or somebody along those lines. I think over 30% for Mikal Bridges, that's a little bit too much in my opinion.
I really don't understand why my camera does this stuff periodically, but it is truly annoying. Really hate it. So you mentioned Mikal Bridges. I'm going to go ahead and do you one better. My thought process on this was Jay Crowder. So we're basically picking the same guy from Phoenix, only we're flipping a coin. So one of Bridges or Crowder probably going over owned.
Yeah. It's just like, it's a price range that I find a little difficult to prioritize. It's a stars and scrubs slate to me.
Yeah. So like I do have a little bit of Bridges, but I'm ultra light on Crowder. You could do the opposite in my lineups right now, and I wouldn't bat an eye at it at all. I knew one of those guys was going to take a haircut, and it ended up being Crowder here. Is there anybody that isn't picking up a lot of ownership that you are taking a stand on as a value option or as a non-value option, I guess, depending on if that guy is like Joe Harris or something?
I definitely don't like Joe Harris today. I guess I'll bring up, no, I guess I'm kind of in line with the field on Michael Porter Jr. I've been light on Michael Porter Jr. almost every single playoff slate, just because so many of my lineups have come out stars and scrubs. But I'm not too much different from the field on Michael Porter Jr. today. I hardly have any Chris Middleton. I know this doesn't really directly address your question. I'm just kind of looking at it from my ownership compared to the field. And I found it hard to get to guys like Chris Middleton also. I think there's a lot of guys in that price range that project better.
I am slightly under the field on Chris Middleton, although I do have him grading out as a slightly better than neutral play, which means Chris Middleton is going to have a monster game while I am light on him, and everyone is going to be tweeting at me about it, and I'm not excited about that.
I don't mind PJ Tucker today.
I was gonna get there, but you could have it.
Yeah. So thank you. I love to have my name attached to PJ Tucker. He played really well last game. And if it was not for, he scored all of his fantasy points like in the first quarter or something along those lines. He got off to a ridiculous start. There was a point where PJ Tucker was the highest fantasy score in the entire game, like 5 minutes in or something like that. But PJ Tucker for a cheap price, Josh, your camera turned off. He played 28 minutes. He ended up scoring 17 and a half fantasy points. I guess the Bucks like that matchup, him guarding Kevin Durant as much as possible. So PJ Tucker, I think they're almost the min price on DraftKings is a pretty viable value option.
I have him right now at 2x the field, 3,200. I like the value, but I have more Brooklyn than I have any other team. I am loading up on Brooklyn, Milwaukee, and quite a bit lighter on Denver and Phoenix. Super chat from Gerald says, can I play Mike James and Kyrie in the same lineup on a Fanduel GPP? My default answer is you can do everything you want to do on a 2-game slate. Mike James's price on Fanduel to me is a little bit problematic. However, that would not be stopping me from having that combination. It's probably not my ideal combination, but it's not an issue to me.
No, it's those are two of my favorite point guards on FanDuel. Overall, my favorite point guards on FanDuel are Kyrie Irving and Chris Paul. But Mike James still at 4,800. He's in play.
Yeah, I don't have much of an issue with it either way. I might try to go to, like, depending on what the rest of the lineup looks like, Facundo Campazzo could be going slightly under-owned at 5K. But that backcourt for Denver is a bit of a question mark. So I'm not entirely sure what to believe there. Any other forwards you want to touch on? We're at about the halfway point.
Just because I know that PJ Tucker's not going to work out, so I really want to attach my name to him a little bit harder. It's a 2-game slate. He played fairly significant minutes last game, and he's projected for under 10% ownership on DraftKings. It's like that's the main reason for liking him. It's not that I have PJ Tucker projected to go out and score 25 fantasy points or anything like that. It's that he's cheap on a 2-game slate. There's a lot of stars to pay up for, and he's coming in with almost no ownership.
Look, if Blake Griffin and Mike James are getting, 60% ownership or more on DraftKings, I'll take my chances that PJ Tucker can beat one of them.
Yeah. I mean, at least, and not every time, but is Mike James really 6x likely to outscore PJ Tucker? At that point, probably not.
Let's check. I can figure that out pretty quickly. Mike James, PJ Tucker on DraftKings. I have it at 80-20 Mike James. And if I add Blake to that trio, I have it at 65% Blake, 32% Mike James, and the remainder, which is basically like 4% to PJ Tucker. So maybe it's not as crazy as it seems, but Blake kind of breaks it because I have Blake projected like crazy.
I like the PJ Tucker memes also.
Well, here's one for you. You might want to change up your tune. Irving, Brown, Harris, Durant, and Griffin. How do you feel about Bruce Brown in the starting lineup?
I probably have to give him a couple extra minutes and take a couple minutes away from Mike James.
I'm on it. Oh, wait. I'm not on it. It will not start again.
Oh, well, there we go. Listen, who wants to see Josh's face during the show anyway?
It says, I'm getting the failed to start the video camera. Please select another video camera in settings. So here's what we're going to do. Since obviously I don't have another one of those, I am going to unplug it at some point in time, but I am going to go through some reads right now because now I could read it directly off of my run sheet without it having to come off the top of my head. We're doing a bit of a giveaway today, folks. If you go to Awesemo_com, that is our Twitter account. Check out the pinned tweet. You can get a free month of Awesemo Plus. Follow the instructions on the graphic, and all you have to do is reply whether Devin Booker or Nikola Jokic scores more points today. One random correct guess will win a free month of Awesemo Plus. Finally, I got to shout out the sponsor today. That would be Monkey Knife Fight. Whether you're trying to play NBA, MMA, PGA, esports, soccer, you can do all of those things at Monkey Knife Fight. And just right out of the gate, when you sign up, use the promo code Awesemo and get a instant match deposit bonus of up to $100 when you sign up with the promo code Awesemo. And this is even cooler. You can win free money tonight. $18, in fact. All you have to do, nope, there's no way this is right. Is this still the same one from the sheet? This is going to be good. Somebody didn't update this. You can't see my face, but I'm giving a dirty look to the camera right now because this read isn't correct because Trae Young doesn't play today and Julius Randle is no longer in the playoffs. So I don't get the sense that Julius Randle's going over anything today. So definitely go to Monkey Knife Fight and use the promo code Awesemo. I can't tell you anything else about an $18 win today because I'm not entirely sure that exists. Anyway, now I'm going to try to figure out how to get my camera to turn back on. Greg, talk to me about centers.
Yeah. By the way, this is really no different than doing a podcast at this point. I don't know. I don't even know. So I guess Jordan's just showing me on camera the entire time now, which, hey, that is fine by me. I think it's fine with the audience also, but center position today. We talked about Blake Griffin, at least from a DraftKings perspective. Really hard to not consider him the top overall center play for DraftKings. The second best center play to me is Giannis Antetokounmpo. By the way, DraftKings FanDuel, wildly different from center perspective today, just because there's so many power forwards that also have center eligibility on DraftKings. FanDuel guys who are more specific, but then off the board, a little bit of exposure for me going to Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, Nick Claxton. I mentioned I like as a pivot play off of Blake Griffin in lineups that don't have Blake. But the majority of my center exposure on DK goes to Blake Griffin and Giannis.
Well, I thought I was going to be able to figure this out, and guess what?
You can't.
No, I cannot, as you can tell. But we're going to keep working on it as we move along. Once we get into the questions time, we'll be fine. I agree. The majority of my center. Thanks, Jordan, for moving it on to just my name. That's great. Pull up the fat cat and the zinc joint, man. Whatever you got to do. Anyway, I'm getting to a lot of Blake and Giannis as well. I am ultra low on Nikola Jokic, which I want to just say right now is a very uncomfortable feeling. I don't enjoy it at all, but you got to take a stand somewhere. Brook Lopez, I think, is going slightly overlooked. I am getting to a little bit of Deandre Ayton, but that is mostly with the field. And as we mentioned before, Nick Claxton is a guy that I'm trying to take a little bit of a stand on just in case something goes squirrely for Blake Griffin. I wasn't totally listening to you, but I do know what you said in terms of Nikola Jokic. I have right now 5%. How overly aggressive is that fade?
I have him 8% right now.
Okay. Did you say that you had him 8% in that original read?
No, I did not. Do not worry.
Okay.
I said, by the way, DraftKings and Fanduel, I'm going to reiterate, are going to be very different for me. I like him on
absolutely.
Fanduel. But so right now, just to make it clear, we're talking about from a DraftKings perspective. And one thing that really changes the outlook of Nikola Jokic on DraftKings is just that Blake Griffin and Giannis Antetokounmpo have center eligibility, and they do not on FanDuel. So being able to plug those guys in at the center position makes a really big deal. So to me, I only have single-digit exposure to Nikola Jokic, and also I strongly prefer the other pay-up options on the slate. I really like getting to Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, Giannis, and there's just a point where you can't spend up for everybody.
All right, here's my next plan. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to send it to Greg to give us his thoughts on any flyer type centers that he is interested in getting to that aren't named Nick Claxton. Jordan, I am going to leave this call, add me back in, and we'll see how we end up. Sounds good?
This is what I've been looking for this entire time. This is all I've ever wanted. Jordan, do not invite him back. This is my program now. But anyway, all right. Center position.
How are you going to say this is my program? You had the perfect opportunity to be like, look at me. I'm the captain now.
No, because that's a little hack. Instead, I took. Well, also, didn't you leave? I thought you left. You're still here.
Yeah, see, I'll never leave. I'm still the captain. Understand what's going on. All right, I'm out of here. Bye.
All right. Eventually, maybe we'll just get Jordan on to be the second host, and Jordan will come on and give some value plays with his slick new haircut that I'm sure that he's very excited to show off on camera. But center plays. All right. So starting with DraftKings, I mentioned a lot of the ownership I have going towards Blake Griffin and Giannis. The lower owned guys, it's still going to be Nick Claxton for me as a flyer, but FanDuel, I think, is where stuff gets a lot different because Nikola, you're back already?
What do you? I didn't have to go somewhere, man. It's 3 button clicks.
I thought you had to go to the bathroom, touch yourself, get a water bottle. I thought there was a whole lot of moving parts here. I didn't realize you were just going to be back.
For the record, I can touch myself while I sit here.
All right. Well, congrats. Good for you. Got all these talents there. I thought I was going to get to take over for a little bit. I didn't even get to talk about anybody else fully, but in the time you were gone.
You keep going, man. You can still have it. Oh, here, I'll pretend like I'm frozen.
All right, good. All right, so Nikola Jokic on FanDuel. Here's what makes him a vastly different play on FanDuel compared to DraftKings is the center options are so much weaker on FanDuel compared to DK, and Deandre Ayton 7,600. That's a fairly steep price. Brook Lopez all the way up to 6,000. Bobby Portis at 4,700. So then Jokic is a little easier to fit in, also just because of the overall state of the value plays on FanDuel and how the pricing works. It's easier to pay up for more of the guys on FanDuel. So Jokic to me is still my favorite center option on FanDuel. Nick Claxton second at a 3,900 price tag. I find that, not really a problematic price tag to get to. And the other thing too with Nick Claxton, he might end up being the optimal center, even if he only scores 16 fantasy points or something like that, just based on all of the other center plays just kind of being average and maybe Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and Giannis all going off.
2,026 concurrent viewers in here right now, even with me being barely on the screen, which I know is a bummer for all 2,000 people that are here. So since we seem to have worked out our issues with my camera, please hit that like button. We are at 557. Let's run that number well north of 600 if we can. Subscribe to the channel as well. Hit the notification bell. All that good stuff. Is there anything else you want to touch on for this slate that we haven't talked about yet?
I'll ask you, are there any off the board center? Because you were gone for 45 seconds. You didn't get your piece in edgewise. Are there any off the board centers that you like? Because I find this to be a position that, other than Nick Claxton, it's hard to find somebody off the board. I think 11% for him on Fanduel is way too low from the field, though.
Claxton's the only guy that I have that is the flyer that I'm looking for. I guess you know what? I'm comfortable saying this, but I think the ownership is wrong here. I don't know how big of a stand I'm willing to take. If Dario Saric is truly the flat minimum, I don't think it's crazy if he gets back into the rotation now that this is a different series.
Yeah, I didn't play him. I don't have him in the rotation, but I agree. If you want to just take a total flyer on somebody for a 2-game slate, that's the kind of boom bust stance you could take on somebody. And, maybe Frank Kaminsky falls out of the rotation. Maybe they find this is a better matchup for Saric than it is for Cam Johnson. And once again, it's a thing where we look at a coach like Mike Budenholzer, look at a coach like Mike Malone. Sometimes these coaches might make decisions that are different than the decisions that we expect or the decisions that we would make. And it's possible that Saric ends up in the rotation.
I'm going to need your help on this super chat. Any value to balanced builds, DBKM, Michael Porter Jr., or just S&S, which I guess is stars and scrubs. DB.
Any value
Chris
to
Middleton,
Baltimore.
MPJ. So Devin Booker, Chris Middleton, Michael Porter Jr. Is there any value to Devin Booker, Chris Middleton, Michael Porter Jr., or just stars and scrubs? Yes, there's value to that balance build.
All right. So it's not my preference, because you're basically making a build and foregoing all of the good value plays on the slate is basically what you're looking to do there. So assuming that's what the question is, no, that's not my preference today.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how to answer it. This would be a really good time for my camera to have been off.
I think we answered that question, right? I think we answered the question as it was intended.
I definitely think we answered the question.
We answered a question.
We certainly did. Well, we've got 17 minutes to go until lock. So I think it's about that time to start taking some questions, maybe some real ones, if that can happen. Or do you have anything else you want to touch on for the slate?
Let's see. I think we've talked about basically everybody at this point. Let me just go through my exposure, see if there's any individual player we missed on. I feel like we've hit on everybody of significance, though. Yeah, I don't think there's a single player that I have a significant amount of exposure to that we have not touched on at some extent.
I don't think it ended up getting into chat, but maybe it did. That Rainbow guy, not a very nice person.
No, there's been some very suspect characters in the chat today. It's been a little problematic.
I don't know what's going on here. That's not ideal. Hey, 595 likes. Apparently you guys didn't hear me before. We were trying to run that number north of 600. I will bring this up every minute until we leave this show if those likes don't go up immediately. Wake up, chat. I know it's Monday, but come on. We are back and better than ever. All right, let's get your questions in. YouTube chat, get them in. Premium Slack, get them in. There we go. Jeremiah Johnson, FanDuel question. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm very ready.
Chris Paul and Bruce Brown, or Mike James and Devin Booker?
So let's see. Where is that question?
It is the most recent question in Slack.
Why is it not showing up for me? All right, whatever.
Maybe
here we go. Okay,
unplug it and plug it back in.
Because I wasn't tagged in it. I was looking through my notifications. So That is Mike James and Devin Booker for me.
It is Mike James and Devin Booker for me as well. And I don't even think that it's particularly close.
Devin Booker is the best shooting guard play on FanDuel by such a stupidly wide margin. The other thing also, Bruce Brown is $2,000 more expensive on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings.
Yep. Greatness 410. It'd be a lot greater if you were 10 bigger. Is Bobby Portis worth a few flyers on FanDuel?
It depends how many lineups you're playing. If you are playing, one or two lineups, no. I personally in the build, I have him less than what the field has him at 13%. I would much rather play Nick Claxton for $800 less and less ownership.
I would be willing to have Portis in 1 out of every 10 of my lineups. Best I could do.
Yeah, so I would like to have Portis in 7 of 100 lineups.
You're really going to do that? I mean, people are going to be super confused and think like 7 is bigger than 1 here. High dollar DK tourney. This is from D Niz. Blake Griffin and PJ Tucker, or Bruce Brown and JaMychal Green.
That is the Blake Griffin side.
I believe that's the same answer for me, but at the very least, I'm entering it into my sheet just to make sure that I'm not lying. And yes, that would be the Blake Griffin, PJ Tucker side. I have that combination outscoring Brown and JaMychal Green 63% of the time. They are more owned, so there is that, but I don't think that really matters here. Let me get Mr. Moneybags first. Paul and Drew Holiday or Cam Payne and Kyrie, DK GPP, 1,200 entries.
That is Paul and Holiday for me. So Cam Payne played a bunch of minutes down the stretch of the last series, but there was some, there was some extreme situations. And number one, the Suns blew out the Lakers in games down the stretch of that series. And number two, Chris Paul wasn't healthy in the couple of games leading up to the blowout. So I suspect that Cam Payne is going to play less minutes in this series than he played towards the tail end of last series. So I gave Chris Paul more minutes than he played at the end of that series. I gave Cam Payne less. So to me, that is the Paul and Holiday sign.
I agree. Clintwood, is 70% Blake Griffin too high on FanDuel? Not to me.
No, if anything, it's too low.
Yeah, I have no issue with it. Well, on FanDuel, he is $1,000 more expensive in comparison. So I understand the hesitancy there, but I would have that if I were playing on FanDuel tonight.
So the other thing, too, with Blake Griffin is his ownership is significantly less. So I think by far the two best power forward plays on FanDuel are Giannis and Blake Griffin. But Blake Griffin, because he's priced up a little bit, his ownership is kind of in line with Aaron Gordon and Jay Crowder. We've got Blake Griffin right now, 36% projected ownership, Crowder 27, Gordon 25. At those kind of ownerships, I really want to prioritize Blake Griffin.
Monty Morris or Cam Payne in a DK GPP?
Let's see. I think that one might be Payne for me, but I'm going to check that.
Morris for me, not close.
Payne, yep, it is Morris for me. I thought comparing those two, it could have been, but it's not.
Last slot in the DK GPP, Cameron Johnson or PJ Tucker? Whew.
That is Cam Johnson for me.
It's PJ Tucker for me by a very minimal margin.
It is Cam Johnson to me by a very minimal margin.
Yeah, neither one of those things are going to make me all that confident. And more often than not, those two guys are both going to fail.
Nah, it's PJ Tucker night.
I hope that it is. Let's see what else we got coming in here. Nothing in Slack right now. No super chats right now, but we do have 657 likes, which means we have 11 minutes to go. And I'm going to ask one last time because I think it would look nice to get that number north of 700. I won't say it again. I promise. But if we can get to 700, I will continue to do this show for the next 10 minutes.
Ooh.
I won't turn my camera off on purpose like I was before.
I don't believe you. I think if we get a question that you're unsure about, I think you are hitting the road.
Pat Connaughton or Austin Rivers in a FanDuel GPP?
Austin Rivers.
Yeah, it's to me not close.
Listen, Austin Rivers sucks, except the Nuggets have a ton of injuries and they're going to roll him out there for a lot more minutes than he should normally play.
Look, there's a non-zero chance he plays 20 more minutes than Pat Connaughton.
There's a non-zero chance he plays 25 more minutes than Pat Connaughton.
But no, it's kind of crazy. PJ Tucker or Bobby Portis?
Portis. If pricing isn't an issue.
I saw it and it was like the most recent YouTube chat question. Yeah, I mean it's Portis. From like a raw points perspective, but they're pretty they're pretty much the same play to me from a point per dollar perspective.
Yeah, so I have more exposure to PJ Tucker. If you're just building a lineup of your last guy in and it's all right, what am I going to do with it? Then you go Portis just because he's more expensive. I have him project for more fantasy points.
All right, nothing else here. Oh, we got the 696 likes, which I kind of like the symmetry in those numbers. So I might not say anything else, but it'll naturally go up. Young's World 81. Do you run 100% Jokic if you think Blake goes off and Claxton gets less burn as a FanDuel GPP center?
No, but also things aren't that set in stone, right? Like there's not one game script where you say this is the game script, therefore this is 100% max. If you're building one lineup and you want to build it around a very specific build, you go ahead. But if you're playing 150 lineups and you say, hey, Blake Griffin's going to get full run and Nick Claxton isn't going to play, that's not how it works. There's not one thing where everything is that likely to happen. I mean, as is one of the main reasons I like Nick Claxton on FanDuel, he's 3,900 and he's projected for 11% ownership. That doesn't mean that I think Nick Claxton, you go out and you play him 80% or something like that, but I have him 3x the field right now. And I think that for his price and ownership, I think he's more likely to go off than what the field is at on him.
Also, Deandre Ayton and Brook Lopez are still on the slate as legitimate starting centers. So no, I wouldn't just be, look, I like Jokic. He is very clearly the highest scoring center, probably even in a bad game today. However, DeAndre Ayton is going to play probably 30 plus minutes. Brook Lopez is probably going to play somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 minutes. I can't just lock button Jokic because Ayton and Brook Lopez are real centers.
By the way, did we get to Soldope's question? I don't even remember anymore.
Did Soldope have a question?
It was a super chat. He asked Chris Paul, Mike James, Bryn Forbes, and Campazzo, Payne, and Brown. I don't remember answering that one, but we've answered a lot of questions over the last few minutes.
We didn't. I totally missed it. So apologies, Soldope. I am going to enter it now. Since you know what the question is, what is your answer?
So for me, that is Chris Paul, Mike James, and Bryn Forbes.
That's not how you spell Brown.
No, of all the names in that side, it was Campazzo, Payne, and Brown. Brown pretty easily the easiest one to spell.
And that's the one that I whiffed on while typing it. Not that I got nothing. Well, I hit I hit N instead of B in the Brown. So I just, anyway, it's not important. 57% of the time I have the Paul, James, Forbes trio. So there's that. Oh, we got another one from Ty. This is a DK question. That would be Drew Holiday and Nick Claxton or Chris Paul and Blake Griffin.
Whew. Paul and Griffin.
I got to see how different this looks when I enter it because the ownership disparity here has to be massive, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's more than double. So I have it 64% of the time, Paul and Griffin outscore Holiday and Claxton, but more than double the aggregate ownership. So if that's a large field GPP question, I like the idea of the Holiday Claxton combo, but Chris Paul and Blake Griffin are very clearly the better combination. Soldo, once again, would you go Campazzo over James on FanDuel?
It kind of depends on the context, but in general, no. I'm really concerned about the minutes that Campazzo played down the stretch of last series. That and Campazzo's still picking up a decent amount of ownership. Campazzo and James are projected for almost the same ownership on FanDuel, and I prefer James. So Campazzo to finish last series, the last 3 games, he played 27 minutes, 21, and that was in the double overtime game in 23. So they made it more of a priority to give minutes to Monty Morris off the bench, and then Austin Rivers also ahead of him. So heading into this series, that's a little bit of a concern for me. And Mike James also. It's not a real pivot just in terms of projected ownership.
We got another one, but we don't have a site, so I'm just throwing this one to you. Crowder, Drew, and Morris, or Brown, Kyrie, and Rivers.
That is DraftKings. I could just tell based on the players and whatnot. But that is Brown, Kyrie, and Rivers for me.
Okay. Are Griffin and Claxton too negatively correlated? No, doesn't matter at all to me.
If this was an 8-game slate, yes, but for a 2-game slate, not really. I think that if you have any lines where you don't play Blake Griffin, I would recommend playing Nick Claxton, but I don't have an issue playing them together.
Yep, same. The salaries matter more than anything else. I don't ever pay attention to individual players being negatively correlated unless it's a real slate with high salaries. Would you play Bridges and Crowder in the same lineup on DK, or are they too similar? You can. I don't have an issue with it.
I just don't think they're the best plays on the slate.
Right. I don't like them individually all that much. So I don't get the sense that I would get a lot of that combination of two guys, but I don't think having both of them is like a problematic thing. They're two guys that are going to play 30 plus minutes. I'll never have a problem. Anytime guys are going to be projected for 30 minutes or more, I don't have a problem playing two of them together.
No, especially not for a 2-game slate. I just don't think they're both low priority plays for me that are going over owned.
That I agree with, but we've agreed about it in different ways there. But same sentiment. What else do we have here? 3 minutes to go. Get your lineups in. 2.5 minutes, and then I'm going to go eat, I don't know, some orzo and some asparagus. I know it's getting cooked right now in my home below me, but I don't know what else is going to be on the table.
Let's see. Did we miss any questions in the YouTube premium Slack chat? It appears we did not. So
no, I've been on it, man.
All right, Josh, which player is most likely to ruin your night today?
The player most likely to ruin my night tonight is Drew Holiday.
For me, it is Nikola Jokic on DraftKings. If Jokic has a massive night, that would be problematic for me and for you as well, unless you've had to rebuild your lineups over the last 30 minutes.
So that's like the inverse of the way that I took that question.
Okay.
Jokic is the guy that can hurt me most by not having him. Drew Holiday is the guy that can hurt me most by having him. Like I'm 2x the field on Drew Holiday right now. If that doesn't go well for me, I'm in a little bit of trouble. And if Jokic pops, that one's going to sting. I just really need Giannis to beat Jokic when push comes to shove. And I've got Giannis projected for 7 more fantasy points. So I hope I'm right.
Yeah, so correlated to that, because my answer is basically kind of the same. Because I'd said Jokic's player is most likely going to hurt me. But yeah, if Budenholzer is just a total dink and goes out and he plays Giannis 34 minutes again. And if the Bucks actually lose this game because Giannis plays 34, 35 minutes, then just ship that guy to the moon. But yeah, that's the biggest issue. If Giannis ends up playing not full minutes, then I think it's a little bit of a sweat for me, whether him or Jokic scores more fantasy points.
Final super chat that will absolutely not get in and be relevant for you. Well, I guess it could be. Can I pivot JaMychal Green over Jay Crowder?
Do whatever you want, but there's a really big price gap between those two, and I have Crowder project for a lot more fantasy points. When we say we don't like guys, it's always going to be relative to ownership and price and everything. It doesn't mean you go play somebody who's 3,300 over somebody who's 5,000. Yeah,
I've got Jay Crowder projected for 9 more fantasy points. These guys aren't comparable at all. But that's it. It is 7:29 and 7 seconds, and there's absolutely no chance that something we say in the final 7 seconds can be actionable information. But we did get to 721 likes because as I started this show and said, this is the main event. This is where it all happens. Thank you to everybody on the prelims leading up for us. But much like a UFC event, the crowd shows up when the main event starts, and that is exactly what happened here. Greg, anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
No, let's go Bucks. I would like them to win today for betting purposes. I have a wager on them at plus 2.5 points. They're now favored. I would appreciate that. And I want the Suns to win. Let's go Suns. I have futures on them.
There we go. Thank you so much for joining us. We're back again tomorrow doing it all again. I'll see you guys on the Process Show. Good luck tonight, everybody. Have a good Monday. We'll see you in the morning.